Arcane Exfil by Dr. Doritos M.D. Chapter 1, Exfil. Alexandria, Kingdom of Keldorn. Good news or bad news? King Armand de Keldor had weighed such matters more times than he could reckon, yet at some point during his long reign, their import had withered. For truly, had there ever been a choice? Always a bitter draught, with scarce a drop of sweetness to ease its way down a regent's throat. Armand kept his gaze out over his kingdom, his reflection faintly visible on the window. There was little left to stir his spirit. The world had long since lost its colour, as had the hope that his reign might be marked by aught but hardship. His prime minister stood behind him, though Armand scarcely took note. With a final glance at the overcast heavens, he steeled himself to choose. The bad first. Get it over with, Alric. Alric sighed, new lines forming on his already weathered face. Sire, the Aurelian Empire refuses our call for aid. Of course they did. They had no reason to lift a finger for Keldorn, no reason that wouldn't serve their precious borderlands. He had expected as much, but hearing it aloud still left a taste as bitter as Marnaleaf. And the others? Alric's next words came out barely above a whisper, though still deafening upon impact. The Kagarian Empire simply ignored our envoy, and the El Noir Republic. He paused, clearly wrestling with decorum. Armand sighed. What did they say? That the matter of our localized skirmish hardly merited the disturbance of their resources. They claim it is a threat we can manage. What could Armand do but laugh? A localized skirmish? As if the forces of hell itself could be dismissed as a border dispute. And manage? What did they know of such matters? Their vast resources, their summoned champions who held the strength of entire armies in one hand, they could afford such carelessness. But Keldorn? No, they were the first line, and they would bear the brunt of it alone. They languish in comfort while the storm gathers on our doorstep. How many would die for the arrogance, the complacency of these distant superpowers? The thought seethed within Armand. The king drew a slow breath, willing his frustration into something more manageable. Losing his composure now would serve no purpose, save to prove that the burden was already too great. There, he had his draught. Now would the honey be sweet enough to erase the bitter taste? Well then, what good news have you to offer? His trusted minister swallowed, lips tight as he stepped forward. Sir Fotham's office reports that they've located suitable heroes for us to summon, though we can afford only one ritual. Summoning magic, their final refuge. But what meagre candidates might they have summoned forth, given Keldorn's barren coffers? Had they but the wealth of Aurelia or Kagaria? Oh, such fancies would serve him naught. Armand held his peace, bidding Alric to continue. They hold power, though not what the great empires would call heroes. Alric began, treading carefully. One is a high schooler, from the nation of Japan as summons so oft deliver. But the others, a group of soldiers, well trained. An elite force of Delta from a land called the United States. It too is a nation upon earth, yet we know but scant of it. Armand rested his arms on his knees, leaning forward. A child and soldiers. Who else? Alric's hesitation was slight but noticeable. A scholar and a farmer, though neither are suited for the struggle we face. He paused, drawing a breath. The child, however, the high schooler, he possesses a skill, a power to manipulate time, not in some grand, world-altering manner, but sufficient to slow or hasten moments as need dictates. We would need to train him, certainly. We can't gauge its limits, but the potential remains present. The king leaned back, shaking his head. Time. That is dangerous, Alric, more perilous than the boy can comprehend. And soldiers, not knights. The minister's hesitation was no longer present, words coming fluidly out of his mouth. They are skilled warriors, sire, knights of their own realm sans noble birth. Though they lack the natural magical prowess we oft ascribe to the summons of legend, their mana reserves are remarkable, far surpassing that of most within Keldorn. Our scrying has determined that their skills in combat are commendable. They may not shatter mountains, but their mastery of tactics and familiarity with firearms is formidable. Paired with magic, it just may render them into the aid we need. Armand took a breath. A child who may bend time, though ignorant of its scope. And soldiers, capable yet unremarkable compared to the legends of Tenria. The soldiers have no extraordinary gifts, no divine intervention. Common soldiers and a mere child. Armand felt the weight of it settle upon him, doubts clouding the clarity he so often forced upon himself. It was preferable to naught, but what hope could such beings offer in the face of a demonic tide? And yet he had seen desperate men achieve the impossible before. Even under Alexander Keldor's legendary command, it had been ordinary men who held the line, bleeding for a kingdom yet unbuilt, dying for a humanity yet unsaved. Perhaps that was the true nature of Keldor, not heroes, but those who stood against the dark, armed with nothing but faith and steel, knowing they were all that held the world back from oblivion. Soldiers, he repeated softly. He felt his decisions shifting like the sands of the demon-infested Istrain wastelands, solidifying the more he pondered. Not heroes, but still, men of war. Ulrich nodded, as if they'd already earned his approval. Indeed, sire. To summon 4 heroes with but one ritual, it is the most prudent of our options. They may not be legends, but in this great struggle, perhaps these men are precisely who we need. Truly, there was no grandeur in this, no tales of gods and legends. Yet he understood, tales mattered little when the time for blood came. Very well. Soldiers, then, Armand said at last. When will they be summoned? Ere afternoon on the morrow, sire. We shall have them then. Kaldat al-Jadira, October 7th, 2025. Given the choice between good news or bad news, Captain Cole Mercer would have opted for no news at all, other than the arrival of a margarita, preferably on a Hawaiian beach. Hell, fuck the stereotype. He'd even take a drink with one of those little umbrellas that always looked so ridiculous, but somehow made the drink taste better. But alas, here he was instead, shoving his way through the crowded, seething heart of a Jadaran city on foot. He'd bunched up with his team, standing shoulder to shoulder with his medic, Mac. His breacher, Miles, and his explosives expert, Ethan, followed close behind. The protesters were everywhere, their raised signs reflecting their loyalties to the Jamaat al-Nadir al-Istiqama. The JNI, the government had done most of the work for them. Years of neglect, corruption, and empty promises had left these people desperate enough to believe in anything. And the JNI, they were more than happy to fill the void, selling martyrdom as salvation. All these people, screaming for revolution, oblivious to the fact that their supposed saviors had just tried to turn them into radioactive martyrs. Some jihad that had a real je ne sais quoi about it, dying for a cause they barely understood. But it wasn't just the government or the JNI. No, someone had to go and fuck it up even further. CIA, Mossad, whoever. They'd all taken their turns poking the hornet's nest, funding the wrong factions, propping up the wrong leaders, all in the name of stability or democracy, or whatever buzzword they were using these days to mask their power grabs. And for all he knew, the usual suspects might have been in bed with the JNI themselves. Wouldn't be the first time someone decided to play both sides. Hell, it wouldn't even be the 10th. Shitty-ass intel, Miles grumbled, the first thing he'd said since they found the bomb. Ain't this city supposed to be under the Jadaran government's control? The fuck are all these nadir puppets doing crawling around out here? There could have been any host of reasons, from botched humint to the simple assumption that the nadirs deliberately showed control in specific neighborhoods to play the city off as safe. Cole could only shrug in response. Wish I knew. Just hope Exfil ain't compromised. Their cloaks would probably fool the average person, but even that wouldn't matter if said person stood close enough to hear him breathing. Yeah, the cloaks provided a thin veneer of anonymity, but the bulky items under them, packs, vests, weapons, weren't exactly discreet. At best, they were a fragile defense, cover as functional as cardboard. As the tide of pro-JNI demonstrators rose, detection went from an extremely hopeful maybe not to a crushing inevitability. Even retracing was a no-go. Forward was the only viable option, however pyrrhic it might prove. Fuck it, He could see the car dealership in the distance, overlooking the park. Just a few more blocks and they'd be home free. The spinning sign flickered through gaps in the crowd, but the way there felt blocked at every turn. People pressed in on all sides now, moving shoulder to shoulder like it was a packed nightclub. The density forced Cole to thread through them, nudging where he could, pushing where he needed. The crowd pressed tighter, his heart thumping harder, and then his heart completely fucking sank. Amrikan, the voice came from his right, from a teen pointing a finger at Cole. Fuck. He kept his head down and hood up, continuing to push forward. But the damage had already been done. Amrikan, the voices hissed again, more of the crowd waking up to the 4 American operators in their midst, 4 of the very devils the JNI had brainwashed them to hate. The crowd thickened, every shove met with another person stepping into their path, intentional or not. He grit his teeth, forcing the frustration back. These civilians weren't the enemy, not directly, but they were just as much a part of the plan as that dirty bomb they'd just disarmed. Human shields, blocking his team's retreat as a final fuck you from the JNI to any souls unfortunate enough to stop their plan. They wouldn't be able to accomplish their mission, but they'd be able to trade blows with the US, removing valuable operators from the board. And of course, there was no helicopter Exfil, the one thing that could have gotten them out of here clean. It wasn't that command hadn't considered it, oh, they definitely had. But there was just no way to get a chopper in when half of Jadira's government leaned toward the JNI, whispering in the same rooms where the US tried to maintain leverage. No way to open up the airspace for a nuclear threat, when that threat had been all but a conspiracy theory until now. A few dead Americans. That was just a blip to the powers that be. Not worth jeopardizing relations over. The emerging sound of vehicles cemented their sorry situation. They were at the mercy of red tape, praying for action from a command that was at the mercy of the most asinine politicians and diplomats to ever grace this earth. The vehicles finally approached, pickup trucks with mounted .50s, technicals. The sea of people blocking his escape, angry, confused, manipulated, wasn't something he could just shoot his way through. Evidently, the JNI had no such reservations. As the gunmen swiveled their turrets onto the crowd, Cole ducked. "Get down!" He hit the pavement, dragging Miles down with him as the sharp crack of heavy machine gun fire split the air. 50 caliber rounds ripped through flesh and concrete alike, bodies crashing down in a mix of blood and bone. A wet spray splattered across Cole's arm, the warmth of it seeping into his cloak. The crowd erupted into screams, raw panic settling in as they realized what was happening. The demonstration devolved into a human stampede, people pushing, shoving, climbing over each other to get away from the gunfire. Fuck, he wriggled his hand down to his push-to-talk button, careful that it wouldn't get crushed. Aegis, Sentinel Actual, Grid 38 SRV 13-0563. Exfil is compromised. We're pinned down near the intersection of Sharia al-Hariri and Sharia al-Shahid. JNI forces opened fire into a crowd of civilians. Heavy civilian casualties. No team casualties yet, but the situation is critical. Need immediate fire support and reinforcements to break contact. Over. Cole adjusted his body, shielding himself from the inevitable as best he could. Weight slammed into him, someone's knee crushing into his ribs, the wind knocked from his lungs as another body pressed down, trying to use him as leverage to scramble up. His back and chest burned from the impacts as more people fled, some of them stumbling, others outright trampling over him. He gasped, his breath stuck in his throat as the weight piled up. Sentinel Actual Aegis, solid copy on all. QRF and fire support are on standby, but we are awaiting confirmation from the Jadiran government to open airspace. EOD teams are en route to confirm the bomb, hold position and minimize civilian exposure. Prepare for contingencies, but no air assets can engage until clearance is secured. Stay sharp. Aegis, out. Oh, fucking A. He stayed down, instinct overriding the urge to move. The dead weight on top of him shifted slightly, more blood pouring out onto his cloak, soaking it through, as if one blanket of despair wasn't enough. He rolled his head to the side, feeling the blood creeping under his cheek. It wasn't his. The pavement had become slick, a red sheen coating everything in sight. It wasn't just blood, it was guts, sweat, dirt, all mixing into a thick slurry that made every inch of the street a deadly slip zone. The permeating scent of iron wasn't any easier to stomach. Amidst the chaos, he forced himself to shift the weight off his back and freed his arms. The gunfire slowed, then finally stopped. This was it. He scrambled up, the blood-soaked pavement making it harder to keep his balance. The AK-74 in his hand snapped up, locking onto the nearest gunner. The man tried to bring his turret down on Cole, but it was too late. One quick burst was all it took. The rounds punched into the gunner's chest and neck, his body slumping forward and collapsing onto the turret. His dead weight shifted the gun, and the turret shifted wildly to the side. The barrel swung back toward the other JNI forces, the weapon firing briefly and indiscriminately until the dead man's finger finally fell away from the trigger. With a tap from his FAL, Ethan had simultaneously eliminated the gunner on the second technical, though lacking the dramatic chain reaction. Taking advantage of the chaos, they retreated into a nearby cafe, laying down suppressive fire on the remaining JNI forces. The shattered windows and overturned tables provided minimal cover, but it would suffice for now. Miles swept inside, while Cole and Ethan maintained their attention outside, gunning down the insurgents foolish enough to pop their heads out of cover. Cole tapped twice on Ethan's shoulder, directing him to maintain their defense while he turned to assess the situation. He was about to call out orders when he caught sight of Mac, huddled in the corner, kneeling in front of a kid on a chair. Fuck, what the hell had happened? The boy, no more than 6 or 7, clung to Mac's side. That was about the age Mac's kid would have been, if not for his wife's miscarriage. The kid was pale, hands gripping Mac's vest tightly. But there was blood. A deep scarlet spreading stain soaked the front of the boy's shirt. Mac lifted the shirt, but it was too much. Even Cole knew. There was nothing they could do to save him. Cole placed a hand on his medic's shoulder. "Mac, we need to move." Mac nodded, resting a hand on the boy's knee before speaking. His tone was gentle, but it was the kind reserved for goodbyes. "Everything is going to be okay?" It was a blatant lie, sure, but maybe the kid needed that more than the truth. As he stood up, Cole noticed it, a gaping wound on Mac's side. Oh, fuck. He quickly turned Mac around, confirming the exit wound on the other side, with bitter relief. "Let's keep moving," Mac decided. "You can patch me up later." His voice was steady for now, the adrenaline probably carrying him, still upright, still operational, but Cole knew the window was closing. The blood loss would hit hard soon. Mac, always the bleeding heart, now he was literally bleeding for it, a tragic symmetry wrapped in shitty irony. Miles returned just in time to catch the bad news, but his report brought a bit of a reprieve. "Backside's clear. There's a construction site up ahead, too tight for vehicles." Cole took it for what it was, a brief opening, but better than nothing. He could tend to Mac once they got there. He turned to Ethan, calling out, "Walker, we're moving out the back." The man already shifted to cover their exit. Cole slung Mac's arm over his shoulder and swapped to his sidearm, allowing his rifle to hang on its sling. Mac's weight slowed him down, but they moved fast, pushing through the alley behind the cafe. The construction site wasn't far, just past a crumbling wall and a half-finished block of buildings. Taking down a pair of insurgents, they crossed into the site, an open area littered with piles of concrete blocks, rusted scaffolding, and the skeleton of a garage. It definitely wasn't ideal cover, but it would suffice for now. Cole glanced around, clear for now, but painstakingly temporary as all respites were. The nadirs would be converging on them soon. Citadel, Sentinel Actual, Grid 38 SRV 128563. We're pinned down near the intersection of Sharia al-Hariri and the construction site. 1 wounded, combat ineffective, requesting immediate casevac and fire support, over. The radio hissed back at Cole, the white noise deafening in its indifference, as if mocking the hope he barely allowed himself to feel. Then came the saving grace. Sentinel Actual Aegis. Airspace cleared. 24 STS is en route to your location. ETA is 20 mics. City is crawling with JNI. Recommend holding position until reinforcements arrive. Prepare for CASVAC and stand by for further instructions. Aegis out. Fucking finally. But 20 fucking minutes. With the nadirs on their way, in a city supposedly full of them? They were sitting ducks, praying they didn't get found. Praying none of the insurgents from earlier had managed to point out their location before dying. Cole turned his attention back to Mac, Ethan and Miles, already holding the perimeter. We got friendlies inbound, but we're fucked for the next 20. I'ma patch you up quick, so lay down, face up, all right? Mac nodded, twisting to remove his backpack. Cole accepted it, digging out the advanced first aid kit lodged within. Gauze and Curlix first, disinfect later, Mac wheezed out. Cole nodded, packing the wound with combat gauze. Blood soaked through quickly, but it'd hold for now. Applying pressure, he wrapped the wound tight with the Curlix roll and secured it all with an ACE bandage. Mac's voice verged on hoarseness, but thank God it still maintained coherency. Morphine. Inject. Cole pulled out the morphine injector and jabbed it into Mac's thigh, then grabbed another. Nah, one was enough. He didn't want to overdo it just yet. Mac groaned. Epi. Keep pressure up. He complied, pulling out the epinephrine injector from his kit and pressing it into Mac's arm. Cole worked as fast as he could, moving on to setting up the saline bag and IV line as pallor crept up to Mac's face. But I knew what came after saline. Mac seemed to sense what Cole was thinking. His breath was shallow, but he forced the next words out. TXA, in the kit, prevents clots from breaking down. Ethan shouted something from the other side, but Cole couldn't afford to look. He fished out the vial. Tranexamic acid. He had no clue what the hell it was, but if Mac said to use it, he wasn't going to argue. Fuck it, he muttered, jamming it into the line. Hemexcel now, he coughed, with the saline. Cole prepped the Hemexcel bag next, gunfire already starting to echo throughout the concrete structure. All right, now the Fent. In my pack, Mac rasped. Actic. Lollipop. First time guys ever asked me for a lollipop, Cole smirked, almost forcing a laugh. He grabbed the ACTIQ stick, shoving it into Mac's mouth. Suck, don't swallow. This ain't that kind of party. A faint, pained chuckle escaped Mac as he clenched weakly around the stick. The drug worked fast, the lines on his face easing a bit. Mac's breath hitched again. Just bought a couple hours, if I'm lucky. Shit, a couple of hours. They'd be lucky to make it 5 minutes. The gunfire grew more intense, a brief lull settling in as Ethan and Miles made it back to his position. How's it looking? Miles asked, positioning himself behind a stack of rebar. Mac's stabilized for now. He'll make it, but, Cole said, glancing down at his watch, our guys are still 10 minutes out. Shit, Ethan muttered. Miles kept staring forward, breaking the subsequent silence with a sigh. To Valhalla, then. Well, it's been a hell of a ride, Cole mustered up his best pep talk. If you really think about it, we basically stopped World War III. And hey, at least we can get the show on the road with the Jadirans now. Man. Fuck the Jadirans, Mac muttered, slurring every word except fuck, which, unsurprisingly, came out clear as day. Cole snorted, yeah, fuck the Jadirans. As if presenting that exact opportunity on a silver platter, the first wave of JNI fighters poured in, making their way up the garage's ramp and exterior stairway. This wave, it seemed, had hardly received any training in urban combat. Or in any combat, for that matter. Cole's muzzle flashed as 3 insurgents dropped, bodies dropping on the concrete ramp. Walker fired over the edge, onto the hapless remnants below, who scrambled for cover with all the futility of resisting the Borg. The next 4 ascending the stairway crumpled, Miles dispatching them like hunting easy game. 8 minutes left. Of course, the moment Cole felt any sliver of hope, reality immediately crushed it. More tires screeched to a halt outside, and he risked a peek. They dealt with the first wave easily enough. But this, it dwarfed it, a force 5 times the size, with fighters who looked like they'd survived more than a few battlefields. Well, Miles said, finally turning to Cole, guess I'll get this out while I still can. Your sister's hot as hell. Cole ejected a spent magazine, slamming a fresh one in. Needed certain death to get that one off your chest, huh? He scoffed. All right, if we make it back home, I'll be sure to tell her you said that at your funeral. Miles smirked, but it simmered as he adopted a more serious tone. But for real, though, It's an honor to die at your side." Well, that was a sentimental side he hadn't expected out of him. Cole paused as he searched for an appropriate response, something he'd seen in a movie once. "It's an honor to have lived at yours. All of you. A bit cheesy maybe, but it felt right in his heart. If anyone thought it didn't fit, fuck 'em." The wind whipped up suddenly, swirling dust and debris through the garage, and only the garage, curiously enough. Outside, insurgents advanced across the lot, oblivious to the localized maelstrom. "The hell?" Ethan muttered. The swirling intensified, kicking up more dust. Beneath their feet, glowing lines etched themselves into the concrete, a familiarity that sang of countless nights devouring questionable manga and anime. Ethan and Miles traded baffled looks, clearly not privy to Cole's epiphany. The air around them bent, warping like heat off Jadaran asphalt. Their world peeled away, unraveling as the light grew. A million thoughts overwhelmed Cole. Fuck, what would his sister think? She'd no doubt received that dreaded visit from uniformed officers, carrying that dreaded folded flag thrust into the dreaded finality of a memorial service with an empty casket. At the same time, he couldn't ignore the Lord's truly impeccable timing, and the fact that they'd be getting a second chance, the fact that Mac could yet survive. No fucking what? The light consumed them, everything folded inward, collapsing into that glowing circle. Chapter 2. Arrival. They weren't dead, not in the conventional sense anyway. How long had it been? An instant? A day? The last thing he remembered was gunfire, Miles wanting to fuck his sister, and a mob of zealots chasing martyrdom. Now it was silent stone underfoot, the sudden absence of the Jadiran chaos both disorienting and, oddly enough, a relief. That and a strange pressure point along his spine that hadn't been there before. Just as he'd figured, they'd been isekai'd. Of course, it could be one of those FUBAR versions where being summoned was a fate worse than death. But even that beat their last stand at the garage. Better odds for him, and thank God for Mac. He'd still need real treatment, but here at least, they had a shot. Cole took in the room. Stone walls, bare, save for the glowing inscriptions carved into the surface. Runes, if he had to guess. They didn't mean much to him, but they were obviously more than decoration. Likely some kind of defense. The guards were another story. They wore scaled brigandine armor, reinforced with composite layering that looked built to absorb impacts as much as deflect them. Half knight, half rifleman, they were equipped for both close combat and ranged attack. Odd, but perhaps even necessary given the evidential existence of magic. Above all, their gear had the unmistakable look of standardization. Identical armor, rifles of the same model. Somebody had clearly put some serious thought into this setup. "Yo, what the actual fuck?" Miles muttered beside them. His voice sounded tense as shit, but the lack of reaction from the guards suggested he'd at least kept most of his cool. Apparently, the guards had prepared for the summoning quite well. They stood in a loose formation, hands on weapons but pointed down. Ready, but not aggressive. The guards struck a balance, vigilant enough to manage any unexpected hostility, yet restrained to avoid provoking it. Their numbers and firepower rendered any thought of forcing an exit futile. But then, given their stance and respectful demeanor, it didn't seem Cole would need that option anyway. Cole kept his stance mirrored to theirs. Rifle at the low ready, not aiming. A quick glance confirmed Ethan and Miles had caught on as well, following his lead. Discipline kept them sharp and ready, as much as possible for guys who'd just been isekai'd. No doubt fighting through shock worse than Cole's, they spread out to form a loose cordon around Mac. Directly before them stood a man who didn't match the guards. Middle-aged, dressed like some court official from a bygone era, he projected a calm authority. His stance was open, hands visible and empty, almost like a police negotiator sizing up a standoff. A diplomat maybe, or something similar. From the lack of hostility, it seemed like they were about to be crowned heroes. But Cole knew better than to buy into the pageantry. He'd seen enough isekai to know settings like these had a habit of chewing up saviors and spitting out scapegoats. Sure, letting anime guide his thinking felt a bit absurd, but the caution was sound, and his instincts backed it up. Identify yourselves. Sir Fotham Fallamore, Director of Thaumaturgy, at your service, gentlemen. The man gave a light bow, answering in English. Naturally, after all, what was an isekai without a built-in auto-translator? The man's lips synced perfectly with the words, oddly enough. So many questions, but Cole could pick it apart later. Top priority was getting a read on this situation. He continued, "On behalf of the Kingdom of Seldorn, I welcome you to the planet of Tenria. I shall trust that you will pardon this sudden change of scene, though I must think, given the peril you left behind, that it might yet prove something of a reprieve." A reprieve? So he knew that meant this wasn't some blind summoning ritual, they were hand-picked. How flattering. And the way Fotham spoke, with that polished, genteel elegance. Well, Cole could appreciate the nuance. It took skill to convey gratitude and expectation all in one breath. His Majesty, King Armand de Keldor, as you might expect, extends his deepest gratitude for your timely appearance here, though I imagine you find yourselves drawn in rather less willingly than you would prefer. Cole felt a scoff bubbling inside him. Less willingly was a hell of an understatement, but he had to admit, they were alive. While he could see the framing of this gratitude, a gambit in diplomatic parlance, it was hard to deny that they owed some thanks. There was a debt here, however unasked for. Nevertheless, here we are, bound together by circumstance, improbable though it may be. We shall, of course, see to your companion's recovery without delay, a small token of goodwill, if you will. One which, I dare say, you might recall when we speak further on matters of service you may render to the Crown. And once he is settled, rest assured, I shall gladly explain all that has transpired to bring you hither as far as knowledge permits. So that was the game, a gesture of goodwill, coupled with a request dressed in decorum. How convenient they had to get summoned at the paradoxically worst and best time possible. Still, Cole respected the finesse. They'd bought his team's lives with magic, and now the tab was due. But for Mac's sake, he could play along, let them do their token of goodwill, and then get the lay of the land. Gratitude wasn't blind after all, and he'd make sure they held on to enough leverage to navigate this. But how exactly were they going to see to Mac's recovery? Magic? It sounded great in theory, but there was no way he'd trust it implicitly. Too many variables. He had no idea how they handled the basics of wound care. Maybe they had germ theory. Maybe they used magic in place of disinfectants. Or maybe they didn't bother at all, assuming the spells took care of it. And what about debris? The bullet that hit Mac passed straight through, but if it hadn't? If they thought healing meant just sealing the skin, that might trap all sorts of foreign particles inside. Past that, being able to heal tissue didn't mean they'd catch internal issues like bleeding or damaged nerves. A quick fix wouldn't do Mac any favors if they missed something deeper. "All right," Cole conceded, "let me clean the wound first." "I ain't letting you do a thing either, not until I know exactly what you intend to do." Fotham offered a slight smile. "Our healing, I grant you, may appear unconventional to you. But I assure you, it's quite comprehensive. We address the wound in its entirety, both seen and unseen harms, if you will, but by all means, tend to your companion as you see fit. I'd think no less of it." Cole peeled back Mac's bandaging. Blood started seeping out again, filling the air with the scent of iron. At least it wasn't bright red, no arterial spray. He pressed gauze over it, applying enough pressure to slow the bleed, but not too much to cause more damage. Grabbing the saline, he flushed the wound. Everything seemed fine so far, aside from the clear shock and blood loss. He then applied the disinfectant, which elicited a short cough from Fotham. Cole ignored it, focusing on the wound. After coating the area thoroughly, he removed the bloodied bandages, clearing the way for the healers. It was risky, trusting them to this extent, but there was no other option. Cole understood first aid as well as any other operator, but he was no medic, and he was certainly no surgeon. The only viable option, as much as he disliked it, was to gamble with magic. He stepped back, giving Fotham a nod. The two healers approached, an older guy who looked like he'd seen his fair share of battlefields, and a blonde girl with pointy ears, an elf if he was seeing things right, who looked just out of her 20s. Then again, if she was an elf, who knew what that meant? Cole figured the older guy was the lead, but it was the girl who moved in, hands aglow with a soft white light. She held her hand over the cleaned wound while the older guy kept the region isolated with barriers. Small particles floated upward, dead skin, debris that the flush missed. It was a small detail, but it at least showed they had protocol. Thorough, yes, a comfort of sorts. But that didn't mean he could trust the process. No gloves. Concerning, but maybe they didn't need any. As the light shifted from white to green, the skin around the wound began to knit itself together. Jesus Christ, Ethan breathed, turning slightly away, yet still drawn to it, like watching a live leak video. Miles, apparently, wasn't spared from it either. Hell, that ain't right. The process was far from the clean, antiseptic affair of sci-fi or the pleasant warmth of the fictional magic he'd been exposed to. Shit, this was biology laid bare, accelerated to a nauseating degree. Tendrils of red snaked through the wound, layers of tissue writhing and fusing over them like hateful flesh. He'd seen his fair share of gore, hell, he'd caused plenty of it. But this little foray into body horror easily took the cake as some of the most grotesque shit he had ever seen. And the kicker, where moments ago there'd been a gaping wound, now there was only unblemished skin. Efficient. Sure. Effective. Terrifyingly so. Easy on the eyes. Fuck no. What unsettled him even more was how easily magic dismantled the laws of physics. It'd be less disturbing, of course, if Cole could do the same. Could he? The glow faded from the girl's hands, magic dissipating like mist. Mac's chest rose faintly, breathing but barely. His abdomen looked good as new, yet he lay there, still looking 1 foot in the grave. Logic dictated that if they could conjure new tissue, new blood shouldn't be an issue. Cells were cells, after all. So why did Mac look like he was running on empty? The despondent look on the younger healer's face landed hard. She quickly suppressed it, but the truth was already laid bare. Cole gauged his teammates' reactions, then turned back to the blonde. How long is he going to be like this for? I cannot yet say. The procedure taxed his body greatly. It's not unheard of for patients to lapse into such states after surviving injuries as severe as his. The healer continued, apparently catching his frown. She explained, regrettably, it is not without consequence. It shall take some time ere he is restored in full. His faculties have thus receded, as it were. Yet fear not. These episodes of profound lethargy are oft attendant upon recovery from injuries nigh unto death. Profound lethargy. The linguistics of this place struck Cole as a bit strange, possibly archaic, but he could pass it well enough. To his knowledge, there was only one condition that matched that description. Cole looked down at Mac. He looked worse than he had in that cafe, sallow and sunk into himself. A coma, then. So all we need to do is just wait, and he'll be fine? The woman nodded. Most recover within a month. Might we bring him to the infirmary? As if he had any other choice. Lead the way, Cole sighed. The two healers lifted Mac with an ease that bordered on the absurd 200-odd pounds rendered inconsequential. The older guy especially, he shouldn't have been able to manage it, not without straining. Instead, they barely shifted their stance, the only clue a faint glow outlining their bodies as they set Mac on a stretcher. Some sort of strengthening magic, maybe. Cole signaled Ethan and Miles, and they fell in behind the procession as guests, with Fotham and a handful of knights escorting them. They exited the Baron's summoning chamber, a structure so fortified it might as well have been a citadel unto itself. The sheer concentration of guards and magical devices spoke volumes about the Keldonians and their caution, playing several roles, a show of force, intimidation, and especially containment. It was real prudent of them, given the inherent risks of yanking unknown entities across realities. The winding corridors, all lacking windows or any external reference point, only validated the idea further. True, it was a damn fine display of defensive architecture, but it was hardly conducive to building trust with one's interdimensional guests. It was hardly the ideal backdrop for diplomatic discourse either. Still, beggars couldn't be choosers, and Cole had to start somewhere. So, Sir Fotham, looks like you've held up your end. Let's get straight to it then. Why'd you summon us? Anything you're allowed to tell us for this little tête-à-tête? Fotham smiled. Your perspicacity does you credit, hero. Rest assured, I'll be as forthcoming as circumstances allow. To answer you directly, we face an existential threat, a demonic incursion. They seek the destruction of mankind. We've several years to prepare, to ready ourselves. Summoned as the kingdom's personal deus ex machina, brought from one battle to the next. He almost wanted to ask if it was optional, if he could spelunk away. But hoping for a slice of life at this stage was admittedly wishful thinking. And that's where we come in, I take it? Indeed, Fotham replied. Every century a new demon lord rallies his hordes against us. Our preparations this time required additional assistance. Cole felt his lips curl into what probably came off as a rather unpleasant smile. And you just so happened to procure arguably the best fighting force on Earth. What, did you get us on sale, or are we just that good of an investment? I suppose one might contend so. Quality, after all, oft surpasses mere quantity, no? Cole eyed Ethan and Miles, searching for a read. Ethan's response was restrained as usual, a tight-lipped nod like he was agreeing to a bad bet. Miles, though, jumped right in. Hell, I'm guessing a thanks. But no thanks ain't exactly on the table neither, is it? Oh, I suppose we could see you returned, if that be your inquiry. Though I dare say you'd find yourselves precisely where you began, with nary a moment's difference. One wonders if that would truly satisfy your curiosity, or merely prove an exercise in futility, no? Right, so basically a death sentence. It was a Hobson's choice in the purest sense, not that he'd expected otherwise. Cole studied Fotham's face for any hint of deception. Got it. Stay here and fight your demons, or go back and die immediately. Hell of a choice, I must say. Was he lying? Maybe, maybe not. That was the one thing he hated about diplomats and spooks alike. They didn't just have the best poker faces around, they showed the world exactly what they wanted it to see. It was impossible to get reliable intelligence out of them. No lie, no truth, not even a half-truth. Just a whole lot of nothing. Fotham tilted his head in acknowledgement, but he clearly had a comeback ready. Yes, I suppose it might seem a touch dramatic from your perspective, but I assure you, you're at liberty to decline our proposal, should you desire. Ethan finally spoke up. So we can just walk away. No obligations, no strings attached. Oh, you may walk away if you like, Fotham replied, waving a hand with what looked like indifference, though Cole doubted he was half as relaxed as he wanted to seem. You're welcome to live as you please here in Seldorn. I'd only caution that when the demons arrive, and they will, they shan't be selective in their slaughter. You'd be fighting for survival in a world reduced to ashes, but do feel free to opt for that quaint sort of freedom. Cole frowned. It seemed like they really did have no other option. Fight for a world that could still be saved, or wander off and watch it burn around us. Same shit, different toilet, Miles grumbled. Haji's for demons. Hell, just another fancy way of saying we ain't got a choice. Think of it less as an ultimatum, and more as a courtesy. We offer you the chance to make a difference, to prevent the demons from leveling every last corner of this realm. Should you refuse, of course, you'd be left to brave the aftermath. But I'd wager you wouldn't much care for the scenery. Spotting the first window they'd seen since their arrival, they reached the infirmary at last. Fotham and his guards stepped to the sides, permitting their entry. A chill met them as they entered, drawing Cole's gaze upward. Spheres lined the walls, smooth and linked by copper pipes that led to a box mounted outside one of the windows. A cooling system, evidently. Pretty damn pragmatic for a world seemingly enamored with the arcane. At least they understood the value of keeping things cool. Great for infection control, and not a bad perk for summer and food storage either. The floor of the infirmary itself was lined with cots, all etched with runes, likely enchanted for healing. Well, if it worked, it worked. Most of the tools looked familiar enough, the scalpels and vials anyway. Cole could hardly guess at what the fluids in said vials might be for, or what the crystalline rings on a corner table were supposed to do. The healers eased Mac down on one of the cots, the older guy leaving to tend to another patient, while the blonde elf immediately checked his eyes with ungloved hands. Honestly, it still felt off, a jarring deviation from ingrained protocol. But hey, maybe they really did know what they were doing. Their earlier performance, The magic cleansing, the isolation barriers, hell, even the cooling and ventilation in this room, all pointed to a grasp of germ theory that, while primitive by modern standards, was functional enough. Ethan walked up, standing over Mac's unconscious form. He looked at the elf. "You said he just needed a month of rest, right?" The girl gave a reassuring smile, the same kind doctors use to calm a worried relative. "Yes, and fear not, he will have our full attention as he recovers. Our healers attend at all hours. Should there be any change, you'll be informed without delay." Cole glanced down at Mac. It was all up to his body and the healers now. "All right," he sighed, returning to the elf. "Thank you, Dr. Elena Gracer," the girl said, offering a smile. "Just call me Elena." "Yes, thank you, Elena," Cole said, giving a nod to Miles and Ethan. As they regrouped, Miles addressed Fotham. "All right, so what are we in for with this king of yours? Fair warning, I ain't got the slightest clue about all that noble etiquette business. I'd rather not get myself axed on my first day here." "You have little to worry about, provided you observe even the slightest modicum of civility. His Majesty, you see, appreciates frankness. By all means, speak freely. Of course, do not neglect proper decorum. Hence, it is proper to address him as Your Majesty." "Got it. Anything else?" Cole asked. "Should you accept the king's proposition, you shall find Keldorn quite prepared to cultivate your talents. You will be trained not only in combat, but in the use and control of your latent magic. Further, you'll be instructed in the fundamental aspects of our kingdom's culture, its customs, currency, written language, and other necessities that will enable your adaptation. All will prepare you for your role as slayers under the Office of Threat Assessment and Control." Cole cocked an eyebrow. Well, that wasn't too bad, all things considered. Fotham's little info dump was as revealing in its omissions as its admissions. Generosity was just a veil. If they were willing to invest this much in them, the demons must be quite the shit show. At least the JNI killed their targets quickly. No doubt they'd soon be wishing they'd taken the offer to return home. "And if we say no?" Fotham shrugged. "Well, my offer of citizenship was entirely sincere. You would receive a reimbursement sufficient to establish yourselves comfortably. You would, of course, be at liberty to pursue a life of your choosing, though without the resources and stature accorded to slayers." After a pause, Fotham continued, "Regardless of the path you choose, rest assured, your man shall receive our full care until he is entirely restored." Quite the info dump to process, and with those opulent double doors looming ahead, time to let it sink in was at a premium. Par for the course, really. Overload the new arrivals with exposition, then whisk them off before they could reason it out. Cole could only hope His Majesty would deign to give them at least a day to reflect. Though that, of course, hinged on the rather optimistic assumption that the king gave two shits about their thoughts on the matter. After all, why risk the new heroes getting cold feet? Far simpler to present their glorious destiny as a fait accompli. One small concession at a time, that was Fotham's game. Heal the dying friend, earn the trust, then oh so casually suggest they might want to look less like a blood-spattered death squad before their royal debut. Fair enough, Cole could definitely respect that. The military-style garments were a nice touch. Practical enough as a replacement for their fatigues, proper enough for court, and just happened to make them look like they already belonged. They'd keep their tactical gear naturally, that wasn't up for negotiation, and their gracious host knew better than to push that particular envelope. The opportunity to wash away all that blood, on the other hand, was an offer Cole readily accepted. And naturally, their little makeover funneled them into whatever Fotham had orchestrated. Look the part, play the part, become the part, all before they'd officially agreed to anything. Well, at least they wouldn't have to fuck up the first impression by looking like murder hobos from some edgelord's manhwa. As they arrived, two sentries stepped forward, pushing the doors open. "Gentlemen," Fotham said, stepping aside, "His Majesty awaits." Chapter 3. Seldorn. Each new sight really lightened Cole's opinion of Seldorn. A throne room, historically, should represent power. Architectural dick measuring, rendered in marble and gold leaf. But the choke point past the doors and the firing slits overhead suggested someone who understood the difference between showing power and keeping it. Not much of a surprise considering the practicality of the interior design in the summoning chamber and the infirmary. Similarly, the king defied easy categorization. Those ears gave away elven blood, shorter than the healer's but distinctly pointed, which made his apparent age a puzzle. Middle-aged by human standards, hair greying at the temples, but half-elven biology threw all those markers into question. Even his authority broke the monarchical playbook. Instead of some ostentatious crown, he wore just a simple circlet. Though the sheen of the metal and the way those inset gems caught the light suggested simple might be relative when it came to magical enhancements. Either way, he had the look of someone who'd long since dispensed with ceremonial bullshit in favor of getting things done. Well, it basically tracked with everything else so far. At last, I had wondered what manner of soldiers might answer our call, not exactly the warmest welcome, but then again, Cole doubted anyone felt particularly cheerful about this arrangement. "I am Armand Keldor, King of Keldorn. And you are?" Cole bowed. "Captain Cole Mercer of the United States Army, Your Majesty. With me are Sergeants Miles Garrett and Ethan Walker. You may raise your heads. I trust Director Fallamore has explained something of our situation." "He has, Your Majesty." When Armand spoke again, it was with the direct attention of a commander evaluating troops, instead of a king entertaining guests. "You would not be the first to stand against the tide. But I would hear your thoughts on the matter." Cole had to admire the king's technique, skip past with the whole "will you help us" dialogue, create the illusion of choice while boxing them into the desired outcome. Though really, what choice was there? Certain death versus a hero's welcome, obvious enough, but he still wanted to think it through. The right answer wouldn't change by morning, but the best decisions were the ones he could still defend after a night's sleep. "We'd like some time to think it over," Cole said. The faint smile that crossed the king's face suggested he'd expected as much. "Of course. Take what time you require to reach your decision," he gestured to Fotham. "In the meantime, Director Fallamore shall show you about the grounds and, rather more consequential, determine the extent of your magic." Magic, right. After all those late nights of Isekai, the chance to actually test his own magical potential. Funny how that thought alone could almost make him forget his family would have to bury an empty coffin. Almost. "The guest wing stands ready for you. You may select your own chambers," Armand continued. "Your servants will bring your evening meal there. The scrying pane upon the wall acts as a window between us. Should word arrive of your companion in the infirmary, or should you wish to speak, we may converse through it. Take the night to consider. We shall meet again on the morrow." A scrying pane, huh? Magical FaceTime sounded real useful, even before considering the implications of real-time communication in warfare. Somehow, it was both a blessing and a curse being presented with a fait accompli like this. Less time racking their brains over a decision, more time analyzing what they had to work with. Cole bowed, following the director's lead. "Man." Miles's voice was quiet as they exited the throne room. "Mac's gonna lose his shit when he wakes up. All them D&D sessions, and now, hell, we're actually getting tested for magic." Cole chuckled, almost needing to force it. The comment landed differently than intended. Everyone caught the when. But at least it gave them something to think about. Another distraction from the reality that now faced them. Cole remembered how Mac would go on about magic theory in his games, especially the one time he stuck a ring of enlargement in front of his gun. He'd probably have 1,000 questions about how magic worked here. Probably, shit, definitely. Turning the corner and seeing the aesthetics of the hallways shift from dark stone to comfortable wood brought Cole back to the present. He addressed Fotham. "So, Director, how exactly does one measure magical potential?" "Ah." Fotham led them down the wood-paneled corridor. Honestly, the atmosphere wouldn't look out of place in one of those old universities, Harvard, Oxford, and such. "We find ourselves obliged to make use of an apparatus called a manometer, being no more elaborate than a sequence of graduated chambers which measures the concentration of mana." Well, that was different. Usually these scenarios involved touching some glowing crystal ball that lit up with convenient color coding. The term manometer suggested something far more precise. Seldorn's fascination with Victorian methodology was starting to read less like an aesthetic choice and more like fundamental principle. Not that Cole would complain, in fact it ranked among the few redeeming features of this impromptu isekai. The procedure itself is, I assure you, possessed of an almost elegant simplicity. You need only cast a barrier spell at a prescribed distance while this clever little device performs its measurement. We've multiple safeguards to ensure the pressure of any mana does not result in a shower of glass. They stopped at a door with a brass placard. The foreign script provided the first tangible limitation to the translation magic that had gotten them smoothly through first contact. Perhaps Fotham's offer to teach them about Keldorn's culture wasn't mere courtesy after all. Beyond the placard, and despite the castle's medieval trappings, lay a decidedly academic space. Metal-reinforced walls and copper-like mesh across the windows hinted at some form of isolation, probably from ambient magic given the context. The familiar shapes of thermometers and barometers along one wall suggested environmental monitoring. Whatever that purple liquid was, it still had to follow basic physics. A tall glass instrument dominated the far corner, a series of 7 identical bulbs connected vertically, rising from a base reservoir where the measurement fluid sat inert. Each bulb bore 3 distinct markings, likely indicating ranges, given how the liquid would need to fill one chamber before overflowing to the next. A simple line marked the floor 3 feet from the device, also marked with unknown numerals. The attention to detail tracked with everything else they'd seen so far. As with all matters of precision, Fotham said, indicating the line, we find ourselves bound by standardization. Now then, shall we address the barrier spell itself before proceeding to any tests? One ought to begin with fundamentals, I dare say. Cole gave him a nod. The director brought them to a series of anatomical diagrams along the wall. The manipulation of mana, you see, stems from a particular gland near the spine, the nerves directing its secretions while the blood bears its influence throughout one's person. Not unlike the way fear or excitement spreads its effects through the body, if you take my meaning. The diagrams showed cross-sections of human anatomy. Someone had clearly indulged in a rather excessive number of dissections to achieve this level of detail. Though the alien labels meant nothing, Fotham's earlier gestures made the subject clear enough. The weird arse pressure point he'd felt since arriving. It just so happened to coincide right where their Victorian anatomists had sketched an auxiliary organ near the spine. A mana gland. What the fuck? The summoning had just casually rewritten their biology. Cole sighed. At least they were getting proper documentation of their modifications, though he'd have preferred a simple system interface at this point. Seeing his INT and STR would have been far less existentially concerning than spontaneous organ generation. Judging from their looks, his buddies probably thought the same. Fotham didn't seem to care much for Ethan's 1,000-yard stare. You'll find that magic depends rather intimately on one's capacity for visualization. Some mages need only think to shape their spells, while others require the structure of proper incantations. Rather like music, if you will, most shall find themselves bound to their sheets. Others, more fortunately endowed, might hear the entire symphony in their minds. Observe, if you would, the formation of a simple barrier. A faint distortion rippled through the air, reminiscent of heat waves off summer asphalt. It started to emit a subtle blue light, as if applying a glow filter to reality. The effect stabilized into a reticulated pattern, interlocking hexagons, translucent but distinct. The purple liquid in the manometer rose smoothly through the first bulb, settling just past the second marking. This imagination, you understand, serves as both instrument and orchestration in this singular arrangement, though I suppose those unfortunate souls who cannot summon even a whisper of melody in their minds shall find themselves forever in the audience, so to speak. The barrier shifted under Fotham's direction, tilting, contracting, expanding like someone was messing around with a model in AutoCAD or Blender. Each transformation maintained that same hexagonal stability, though the patterns flowed and redistributed with each change. The manometer throughout all this saw only the smallest of fluctuations. To form such a barrier, first you must sense your mana. You'll find it rather like becoming aware of your pulse, though in this case you're seeking a particular warmth of current flowing through your nerves. Cole focused on his arm, trying to isolate any sensation that wasn't just normal muscle tension or blood flow. There, something different. Turns out Fotham wasn't bullshitting. It was a warmth in his blood that seemed to respond to his nerve impulses flowing from that new organ. Kinda like adrenaline, but controllable somehow. Having found that sensation, directed outward through your arm, as if pressing against something unseen. It felt truly strange, about the same level as trying to control each individual toe. Yet there was a natural feel to it. The sensation intensified and spread across his arm. As he built up the energy, he caught new diagrams on the wall, 5 sequential sketches showing the progression of barrier magic. First figure radiating waves, then containing them before stretching it into a plane. You shall feel resistance as the mana takes form. Picture that resistance shaping itself, rather like cupping water in your hands, but not overflowing. Allow your mana to find its natural form, much as water seeks its sphere. Cole was nearly on the verge of asking why Fotham didn't bother starting with verbal incantations when the air in front of his arm rippled. The man smiled. Well, if this was a test, then Cole sure as hell wasn't going to fail it. Now then, visualize the pattern as it forms, much as ice spreading across a winter pond. The more clearly you hold that image in mind, the more readily your mana shall align. Right, like the 4th diagram, the transformation from compressed energy to crystalline structure. The distortion wavered as Cole tried to find that point. Not quite ice forming on a pond, more like those videos of ferrofluid snapping into patterns under magnetic fields. The air shimmered, the plane of mana almost settling into geometry, then destabilized again. Glancing to his sides, Miles seemed to be around the same stage, whereas Ethan had already formed his very own barrier. Not surprising, given the level of spatial visualization that bomb disposal demanded. Cole took a breath before trying again. The manometer's purple liquid oscillated with their attempts. Maintaining this kind of precise pressure while simultaneously drawing more unknown energy through his system required nothing short of his full concentration. Then it clicked. Cymatics, those elaborate patterns formed by sound frequencies. The barrier's hexagonal structure suddenly seemed less arbitrary. If mana behaved anything like other wave phenomena, those patterns represented points of stability. Sort of like how blast waves created predictable patterns, except this was holding a standing wave in place instead of letting it propagate outward. Though that raised the question of what happened when the resonance broke down. The thought barely finished forming. Cole's barrier snapped into place, a short wall composed of mana arranged in a honeycomb lattice. Maintaining resonance, he realized, was basically just holding a sustained note. Break concentration, lose the frequency, lose the barrier. A brief glimmer to his left flared up. Miles had finally gotten his pattern locked. Excellent progress, gentlemen. Fotham's pleased expression carried the same quiet pride Cole had seen in his old drill instructors, the ones who'd set up damn near impossible challenges just to watch their trainees rise to meet them. Now then, shall we proceed with proper measurement? Sure, Cole said. If you would, Sergeant Walker. Fotham indicated the marked line before the manometer. Direct as much mana as you can summon into your barrier. One must have a proper measure of your capacity, you see. The purple liquid responded the moment Ethan took position, climbing smoothly through the first bulb and into the second. Foreign numerals aside, the progression seemed logical enough. Had to be some inverse square relationship at play, given how particular they were about that 3-foot mark. The fluid kept rising as Ethan held his barrier. No shock there, he'd been the first to get it right. This kind of visualization probably felt like a vacation compared to picturing bomb internals. By the time it pushed through the 3rd bulb and settled near the first mark of the 4th, Cole had already done the math. Level 10, Fotham nodded, writing something in a notebook. The repeating patterns in their numerals had suggested base 10. Nice to have confirmation. 10 out of 20, huh? Ethan grinned. Yeah, guess I'll take that. Mac sure as hell would love this. Hell, it'd be pretty poetic, rather funny as shit, if their resident enthusiast turned out to have the most pedestrian metrics. But right now, Cole had more pressing concerns. The imminent assessment of his own magical aptitude weighed on him. He wouldn't ask for much, manifesting some absurd statistical outlier like any other Isekai protagonist would be great, but he'd settle for demonstrably competent. Though given Keldorn's apparent penchant for expedited integration, he doubted they'd get much time to dwell on the results either way. All the time in the world to make it a pissing contest with the boys, though. Captain, moment of truth. Time to find out just what the summoning had given him. Cole took position. Right then, flood the barrier with every bit of mana he could muster. The fluid rose through the first bulb almost immediately, his barrier snapping into that hexagonal resonance without the earlier wobble. Practice made perfect, apparently. The second chamber filled as he pushed harder. Different sensation now, like pressing against an invisible wall while that warmth flooded through his nervous system. His barrier flickered brighter, patterns growing more distinct as he forced more power through them. The liquid crept into the third chamber. More. The warmth flowed through his body as he channeled everything he had. Past Ethan's mark now, climbing toward the second line of the fourth bulb. Cole grit his teeth, maintaining that perfect resonance even as the energy threatened to destabilize. The fluid finally settled. Level 12. Was that satisfaction on Fotham's face? Cole held back a smirk. Not bad for a nice little tour de force. Definitely not bad, considering the high probability of the alternative level 1 cliché. Now to see what Miles could do. Miles took his position, expression focused as he formed his barrier. The liquid climbed steadily through the chambers, finally settling at the first mark of the fourth bulb. Level 10. Fotham nodded, then lowered his voice. Well then. 3 competent heroes at the price of a single summoning, not the most remarkable heroes one might hope for, perhaps, though I dare say rather efficient in terms of expense. Remarkable heroes. Hell, if Fotham was still disappointed, just what kind of monsters were they supposed to be fighting? Now then, I believe His Majesty mentioned showing you about the grounds. There are several matters which may be of interest to you. The library, the training yards, and of course the armory. Cole couldn't disagree. Yeah, it'd be pretty interesting to see just how those guns of theirs worked, and more importantly, how they interacted with magic. Lead the way. Fotham guided them through an adjoining door from the lab section. It opened directly onto what had to be the castle's research library. 3 floors of shelving with the same Victorian sensibilities as everywhere else. A network of copper pipes crossed the ceiling, keeping the books cool and dry. He led them past empty reading tables to a section near the entrance. Your preliminary materials for the orientation period, Fotham explained, indicating the prepared books before gesturing to the brass gates that barred the upper floors. Further resources shall become available to you once you've been properly integrated with OTAC. Cole pulled out a random volume while Ethan and Miles looked around. Maybe it just took a while for translation to kick in. Unsurprisingly, the spine's script remained as stubbornly foreign as the placard outside the testing room. Still, he grabbed another, that familiar, futile optimism of rechecking an empty fridge. No joy. He slid it back with a sigh. Fotham's offer seemed almost mandatory now. So, say we agree to help you. What's the training sequence look like? Cole asked. A month's instruction in the fundamentals, I should think. Matters of language, cultural particulars, basic theory of magic. Following that, presuming you find our arrangement agreeable, you would transfer to OTAC's facilities for the full course of Slayer training. You may, of course, find yourself interacting with other offices. My own, the Office of Thaumaturgy, maintains certain collaborative interests with OTAC, where matters of specialized magical knowledge are concerned. Specialized, huh? Miles walked over. Like, what kind of specialized? That rather depends on the circumstances. Summoning heroes for one, Fotham replied, nodding his head to them. Fair enough. The answer was pretty vague, but Cole couldn't reasonably expect the man to betray OPSEC on a whim. They'd probably learn soon enough about it anyway. Well then, Fotham clasped his hands. Shall we proceed to the yards? Deep booms from heavy rifles echoed down the corridor, certainly not any measly .22. The report suggested something well beyond .50 caliber, which didn't bode well for his future encounters with whatever the hell required that much stopping power. Fotham led them through a covered walkway that opened onto the castle's western yard. A series of firing positions had been set up at the far end, occupied presumably by researchers donning heavy canvas coats, leather aprons, and face shields. The rifles they worked with looked similar to the ones he'd seen the guards using, albeit with a few minor differences, some sort of pocket near the stock, gleaming brass-like fittings around the chamber, and runic patterns spiraling down the barrels. Each shot distorted the air like heat waves rippling outward. "Our research division, testing various enchantment configurations," Fotham said. "Mauser action, or something close enough." The shooter seemed to have the rhythm down, load around, flip what looked like a selector by the trigger guard, pause for a moment, probably channeling mana, then fire. First couple shots were normal enough, just cratering the reinforced backstop. Then came something different. Blue flash from the chamber, and the next impact somehow turned the splintered wood to ice. More than just frost. Looked like the cold radiated outward from the point of impact. Interesting. It answered a few questions about their design and how they worked, but raised about a dozen more. The selector had to be for choosing effects, but what about the split-second timing between shots? And what stopped the effect from dissipating after the bullet left the barrel? It was probably connected to those brass-like fittings somehow. Basic mechanical linkage tied to the trigger, perhaps. "Enjoying the demonstration, The question snapped Cole out of his analysis. He offered a nod. Fotham smiled. "Perhaps you'd care to try it yourself." Chapter 4. Size Matters. Fotham led them to the armory complex beside the training yards. Cole paused at the weapon racks. The rifles shared that Lee-Enfield profile, but the builds were closer to anti-materiel weapons, the kinds normally reserved for taking out light vehicles. And these weren't specialized loadouts. Every rack held the same heavy configuration, as if a weapon on the scale of a Barrett .50 caliber was nothing but standard issue. Just how much punishment could demons take? "Those shall come in due course," Fotham said, "though I dare say we ought first attend to the matter of keeping your bones intact when firing one." Cole smirked. "Yeah, good idea." Past the racks of weapons and armor in the main hall, an adjoining chamber opened up. Simple training equipment lined the walls, racks of weighted spheres and bars marked with numbered bands. Even in another world, pumping iron was still pumping iron. Fotham pulled down 3 iron spheres. "Here. Take the measure of its weight first, without trying any magic." Cole grabbed the handle of one, compensating against the familiar heft. 60 pounds, based on the inscription on it. Exactly 60 pounds, oddly enough. Before he could even begin to wonder what that implied, the Seldornian grabbed another, which had to mass at least twice as much. Where a normal guy of his stature would have likely snapped a muscle just trying to pick it up, Fotham raised it over his head as easily as one would lift up a phone. Anyone who'd done enough weight training could spot the wrongness immediately. He lacked bracing, muscle tension. Hell, there was basically no adjustment for the shifting center of mass at all. The man's body simply refused to acknowledge what that weight should be doing to it. Most practitioners, upon their first attempts, endeavor to envelop themselves in mana, rather like wrapping oneself in invisible armor. Most inefficient indeed. As with barriers, while one might certainly shroud oneself completely, you shall find precise application yields superior results. A single well-placed barrier demands far less mana than attempting to shield oneself from every quarter, does it not? Fotham set down his weight. "Start simple. How does lifting the sphere feel?" Cole raised his arm, curling. "Familiar enough. Starts with a bit of tension in the forearm, then the bicep takes over. Gotta brace a bit so the shoulder stays locked in place." "Hell, ain't nothing to it," Miles said, working his weight. "Quite so." "Now then, attend to that inner warmth," Fotham said, gesturing to his chest. "Rather like stoking a furnace, one must cultivate the heat ere attempting to direct it. Now observe the sequence." He lifted his weight again. "The strength begins in the great muscles that anchor your arm to the chest wall. It flows thence through the shoulder, down through the upper arm, like blood through the veins. Each portion of flesh knows its role in sequence." Cole closed his eyes, focusing on that strange new organ and the warmth it produced. Getting the mana flowing wasn't the hard part anymore, but trying to enhance his muscles directly just wasn't working, almost like trying to fill a water balloon by spraying it with a hose. The mana dispersed uselessly, and the sphere stayed stubbornly, precisely 60 pounds. Too much force, Fotham corrected. Attend first to how you hold the sphere. Cole adjusted, toning down the flow of the warmth like he was twisting a faucet. Still nothing. Next to him, Miles kept shifting his grip slightly, like he was close to something but couldn't quite get it. The tendons, he explained, tracing lines across his arm, guide its course, much as great ropes bind muscle to bone. Do you feel how they tighten in sequence? The mana must follow these same paths. Direct it elsewhere, and you shall find yourself working quite against the natural design of your body. Made sense. They'd figured out the basic hardware, probably through a bit too many dissections. Muscles, tendons, major nerve bundles. But they were missing the whole control system. The interplay of neural pathways that turned those mechanical parts into coordinated movement. Wait. Cole paused, glancing down at his weight. He thought back to the barrier magic. How the mana had felt like adrenaline flowing through his system. And adrenaline worked both ways, didn't it? Flooding the bloodstream like Fotham was describing, but also firing through neural pathways. Two systems working together. If mana followed that same pattern, maybe he was thinking about the wrong paths. Not just the blood vessels and muscles Fotham was describing, but the neural pathways that controlled them. The same ones that governed force production and power output, the real key to strength. He focused on the grip sequence again, not on the muscles themselves, but on the force generation pathway. He focused on the way his body coordinated the lift, from stabilizers to prime movers. This time, he let the mana flow along those same neural roads. The warmth spread differently now, not fighting his body's architecture, but enhancing it. It went from an uncontrollable overflow to following the exact pathways his system already used to produce force. The weight shifted slightly. Indeed, like so, Fotham said, approving of Miles's work. Huh. It wasn't Ethan this time. Cole continued the movement, letting the mana amplify each step of the sequence he knew by heart, like taking his body's normal strength production and cranking up the gain. No way would he let himself be the last to figure it out. The weight began to feel very different indeed. Fotham walked over to him. Excellent. Now you must teach your body to accept its new capabilities. Cole knew exactly what he meant. Every muscle group was fighting against years of learned responses. It was like living through one of those gym prank videos, the one where the pranksters replaced weights with foam and just watched people overcompensate. Good, Fotham addressed Ethan. He turned to the rack and lifted down another set of spheres, 80 pounds if he recalled the number system from the manometer correctly. We begin again. Attempt it with minimal strengthening. Indeed, none at all if you believe yourself capable. Cole could probably pull it off, but a sphere attached to a handle didn't exactly offer the same grip and distribution a normal dumbbell did. He paused, wrapping his hand around the handle. Better to play it safe. He wasn't like Miles after all. He kept it minimal, about enough to make the 80-pound weight feel like it was 60 before amping it up. A quiet nice from Miles drew his attention, probably glazing his own muscular abilities. Ethan was still working through the basics, but his persistence was paying off. Every few reps showed better form. They progressed through 2 more weight increments until they reached the 100-pound spheres. The process felt different now. The mana flowed smoother, not quite at the reliability of Steph Curry's money shots, but good enough that he didn't need to allocate his full attention to it. All he needed to do was think it, and it was there. Excellently done, Fotham said finally. Come, I believe you are now ready. He led them back into the armory proper. The heavy rifles still fascinated Cole, their obvious similarity to historical long arms, but engineered for stresses that would tear a normal weapon apart. Fotham selected one, checking the action before gesturing them toward the range. The next item from Fotham's checklist turned out to be hearing protection. Christ, these looked like something straight out of a Bioshock game. Brass and leather amalgamations that belonged in a museum, right next to Civil War rifle cases and whatever the hell a heliograph was. The engineering geeks, including himself under normal circumstances, would probably get hard over the concentric damping rings, But all he could think about now was how effective these things would be, or rather, how ineffective. He'd used Comtacs for the Barrett, and even those struggled with the concussion. Now they were about to fire what amounted to magical anti-tank rifles using these contraptions. The runic pattern didn't inspire confidence either. They had fewer lines than the more complex runes along the rifle's brass fitting and barrel. Simpler was just better, apparently. Or maybe Seldorn's healers were really good at regenerating auditory nerves. He braced himself as Fotham completed his checks and fired the handheld cannon. The pressure wave hit like a hammer to the chest, but his ears barely registered more than a deep thud. No ringing, pain, or even that bone-conducted resonance he'd grown accustomed to. Well then, looks like Keldorn's engineers knew what they were doing after all. Fotham beckoned them closer, presenting the rifle grip first. He ran them through the basic operations, mostly the same as any bolt gun, but with small enough differences to warrant attention. Standard action, he said, cycling it smoothly. Brass cartridge, powder charge. He pointed to patterns around the chamber. These fire and air runes enhance the blast. Those along the barrel maintain flight. Damn, between the caliber and the enhanced blast, no wonder Fotham was so adamant about teaching them strengthening magic. Nothing short of a Humvee could handle this, certainly not any ordinary human. Now the fitting here. Fotham tapped the brass-like metal wrapping the chamber next to the runes. Aerocalcum. The rifle accepts mana through these channels, allowing for various effects as you shift the selector. 4 positions, you'll observe. Standard ammunition, followed by ice, fire, and lightning. He turned to the rack behind them, selecting 3 more rifles. He handed them each one, along with leather pouches containing loaded box magazines. Observe first. He slid a magazine home and worked the bolt. Without enhancement. The rifle cracked. The round punched through an earthen target about 100 meters out. Pretty much what he'd expect from a powerful bolt gun. Your turn, Fotham said, raising up more earthen dummies with his magic. Cole stepped up to the line, checking the magazine before working the bolt. Weird going back to this. Last time he'd handled this old of a weapon was what, that surplus Mosin at the range. The action felt smoother though, almost like handling a well-maintained Car 98K instead of something straight out of World War I. The bore looked clean enough to eat off of, and the action cycled like it was running on bearings. Though it had different weight distribution from his usual gear, more front-heavy than even his loaded-out Mk18. Seriously, what the hell was the barrel made of? Still, fundamentals were fundamentals. He squared up behind the sights. The recoil was stout but manageable when Cole squeezed off his shot, kinda like a Magnum rifle, but nothing they hadn't handled before. Miles and Ethan followed, their shots hitting on target. Cole tried again, this time with strengthening magic. Thank goodness for it. His body probably would have been screaming for mercy if he had to deal with this for dozens of shots. Good. Now then, should you wish to impart enchantments or amplify the power of your shot, you must incorporate magic. Fotham inserted a bluish gem into a slot near the rifle's grip. Allow me to demonstrate with a mana crystal. Mana crystal? It wasn't the most creative name, but at least it was easy on the lips. Fotham selected the fire rune, which flickered to life just before he squeezed the trigger. A red flash engulfed the weapon as he fired, accompanied by a much sharper crack, like comparing standard 5.56 to hot-loaded match ammo. Same round, way more juice behind it. The target showed a clean hole, but what followed was pure high-explosive incendiary. The exit crater erupted in a shower of dirt and flames, leaving the earthen backstop glowing red-hot around the impact. Physics was still physics at least. More velocity, more kinetic energy. But hell if the magic didn't add its own crazy flavor to the mix. Much as with our prior exercise in strengthening, one must first perceive and direct its flow. The channels are already wrought within. You need only guide it. Fotham showed his posture. Place your hand thus. You'll find the crystal's emanations rather cooler than your own mana. Cole did as Fotham instructed. The pathways were there, sure enough. It almost felt like an extension of himself, probably the same as what the various fictional characters he'd seen might have felt when handling a wand or sword. Now then, strengthen yourselves, Fotham said, and when channeling the crystal's mana, begin with but a trickle. The rifle should be quite responsive even to minimal input. Cole nodded. He searched for the sweet spot where the rifle still had enough weight to handle naturally. Making it too light would be like trying to shoot a Nerf gun. He needed at least some mass for stability, for the familiar feedback of a proper weapon. He focused on the crystal next. Minimal flow. The enchantment rune flickered dimly. He fired. The recoil was still substantial, but his enhanced muscles absorbed it better now. Like firing a .50 BMG, but with his whole body tuned to manage the force. The rifle stayed on target through the shot. Physics still applied, thankfully, but at least hitting follow-up shots would be easier with strengthening magic. The fire and air runes, though, improved deflagration was one thing, but that kind of power increase. The pressure curve had to be getting modified somehow. Maybe the runes were controlling the gas expansion rate in the chamber. Regular deflagration could only push around so hard, no matter how perfectly the powder burned. It kinda reminded him of those experimental ETC guns DARPA had played around with, using plasma to jack up the energy transfer. He couldn't say for sure without dissecting it or learning how to read runes, but the magic had to be doing something similar, pushing that pressure wave faster, harder, closer to detonation speeds without actually crossing that line. No wonder they needed special chamber materials. Well, holy hot damn. Miles lowered his rifle, a grin stretching across his face. His target showed similar handiwork, clean in, catastrophic out. And that's barely any juice? Indeed. While precision and control shall generally serve you better, occasions arise whereby brute force proves necessary. The greater demons are not so readily dispatched. Best to master both approaches. Start with minimal enhancement, then we shall proceed upward in measure. Now, try the other selections. Next up were the ice rounds. Leave it to Victorian combat engineers to look at hollow points and think, not quite devastating enough. The initial wound channel was just the starting point. Those crystalline formations propagated through the target mass, as if giving it the Han Solo treatment, only engineered specifically for maximum tissue destruction. Hell of a way to bypass the Geneva Convention's restrictions. Though given what they were up against, perhaps excessive force was precisely the point. And besides, demons definitely weren't covered under the Accords. Then there was the lightning setting. DARPA had blown billions trying to develop directed energy weapons, and here was Seldorn solving the problem with Victorian metallurgy and some particularly aggressive runes. Not those neuromuscular disruption payloads that never quite worked. Nah, this was actual lightning delivered straight through a bullet somehow. The projectile punched through and turned the whole wound channel into a conductor. The great Nikola Tesla would have been either fascinated or apoplectic. Now, without the crystal, steady pressure, like a well-regulated steam valve, too much force will strain the channels. Cole channeled his mana outward, a similar feeling to casting barrier magic. However, this required more finesse, more like maintaining steady pressure through an IV drip than trying to fill a pool with a fire hose. Once he found the right flow rate, it felt no different from using the crystal's power supply. Same pathways, same response from the rifle, just drawing from his own reserves instead of an external source. And thank God it didn't demand much from his own reserves. His head was still throbbing from the strengthening magic and barrier test, and that dull ache in his lower back had grown from a minor pain into an acupuncturing mishap. Only his admiration of the weapon's design philosophy offered any hope of distraction, though even that seemed questionable. The Seldorians must have approached this through steam engine theory. But wasn't mana flow closer to fluid dynamics? Too much flow rate leading to turbulence, wasting energy and risking damage. Would explain their emphasis on control and why the crystals seemed to output at specific rates. Made sense as a backup too. Something that enabled tired men to keep on trucking. He'd have to check the library when he could. There had to be something on the framework behind all this. Excellent progress, Fotham said. I perceive you possess a rather promising facility for channeling. We shall, of course, refine your sustained output during your initial course of instruction. Ethan chuckled. He's got away with words, doesn't he? The library comment stuck with Cole. Fotham carried the same presumptive tone as the king's offer, as if their acceptance was merely a formality waiting to happen. Which it was, quite honestly. But hell if the lack of agency didn't just grind his gears. The rest of the tour beckons, Fotham announced, barely giving them time to process. I believe you'll be rather excited to see what our kitchens and guest accommodations have to offer. Cole returned his cleared rifle to the rack. All the planning that must have gone into this, not just the weapons themselves, but also the civilization that had spent years, decades perfecting them. It couldn't be from some haphazard response to a demon incursion. It was a long-term development that suggested an equally long-term threat, one he'd be signing away his life to. But hey, it'd all be worth it if the food's good and if the beds are comfy, right? Chapter 5, Home Sweet Home. The infirmary was close enough to the armory to justify a quick revisit, but lingering any longer than necessary wasn't worth it. Mac was still there, lying in his bed, at the mercy of his coma. Cole could visit later, for now just familiarizing himself with the basic layout would do. The kitchen proved more lively. The area rivaled any modern commercial operation in scope. Despite the numerous occupied stovetops aglow with flames and red light, the room didn't feel stuffy, like a Korean BBQ joint with proper ventilation. Another steampunk pastiche, courtesy of Seldorn's finest artisans. None of the dishes looked familiar, though. Various meats Cole couldn't identify sizzled in massive pots, surrounded by vegetables that definitely weren't in any Earth cookbook. The smells were good, at least. Hell, after dealing with a JNI dirty bomb, the ensuing clusterfuck, and then getting isekai'd, his stomach couldn't care less about alien gastronomy. Fotham, despite his intentions on behalf of the kingdom, seemed at least considerate of the shit they'd been through. Probably having heard their growling stomachs, Fotham led them to a cook built like he'd spent his life hauling heavy sacks of food and cookware. Master Marwyn, Fotham greeted him, our special guests have been at practice. 3 mana potions, if you please. Training, are they? The cook gave their gear a long look, but his thoughts remained unspoken. Never seen soldiers fitted thus, begging your pardon, of course. Turning to a shelf, he grabbed 3 blue vials. Fair warning, nary a soul drinks this without grimacing. Bitter as an Aurelian at market. Though we've ways of making it less offensive. Marwyn turned to what looked like an icebox built into the wall. Sunfruit press helps it down, or... He pulled open the door, cold air spilling out. Ah, apples from the southern provinces, fresh as morning. Rare sight indeed. Though, well, there's other mixtures that serve just as well. As enticing as it was to get hammered after dealing with the strangest day of his life, Cole had to turn down the offer. Yeah, maybe another time. I think we'll just go with the apple juice, right? His team nodded, eagerly so. Looked like no one wanted to play guinea pig with sunfruit. Not today, at least. The apple mix would do just fine. They'd already signed up for 1 mystery drink with that blue stuff, and that was plenty for now. They downed the drinks together. Not bad. The apple juice masked most of that promised bitterness, though a metallic aftertaste lingered. The warmth spreading through Cole's chest felt like that first sip of coffee in the morning, minus the usual jitters. Some of that training fatigue started to fade too. Hungry lot, I'd wager, the cook said, still tending his pots. Got a good consommé on, marsh buck stewed with koreth root. Been at it since dawn. Also got drell flanks rubbed with vis and aged in wine. Sarn and cave pheasant from the eastern ranges. Riverfish in melted butter with fresh shrolt. He wiped his hands on his apron. His Majesty's special guests ought to eat proper after all. The aromas wafting through the kitchen conjured up those fancy cooking shows where even the intrepid hosts sometimes found themselves linguistically fucked. Koreth root, vis, at least marsh buck and cave pheasant, gave him some idea what he'd be eating. The wine-rich smell from that drell dish was pretty darn promising, though. After months of MRES, he sure as hell wasn't going to turn down some royal Michelin star bangers. Hell, reckon we might as well try a bit of everything, Miles said, probably thinking the same thing. Ain't had something proper in a minute. No argument there. At this point, Cole would have demolished a 7-Eleven hot dog, let alone whatever culinary extravagance they were about to get. Fotham nodded to Marwyn. I shall have the maids fetch the meals when our guests have settled upon their quarters. Now, he turned to Cole and the others, let us proceed to the guest wing. From the kitchens, a series of corridors branched deeper into the castle complex. Cole kept track of their turns, left at the first major intersection, past what looked like administrative offices, then up a broad staircase lined with bright lamps. Their path led through an open-air colonnade, where afternoon light threw bold shadows across a checkered marble floor. The castle grounds stretched out below, visible between the classical columns, reminded him of those old European castles he'd visited years back. Same grandeur, same attention to detail, almost literally. Funny how that worked. Of all the possible forms an isekai world could take, it just had to be medieval European fantasy. Maybe architectural styles followed some universal law of convergent evolution. The guest wing occupied the castle's eastern corner. It was perfect for visiting nobles or foreign dignitaries. Morning sun, decent elevation, multiple evacuation routes if Cole read those hallway junctions right. The deeper they went, the more refined the decor became. Polished wood replaced stone walls, while elaborate carpets replaced marble. Runic patterns lit up as they passed, almost acting like motion sensors, some kind of monitoring system probably. The guards they'd passed were positioned at key junctions, maintaining clear lines of sight down each corridor. Between this and the fortress-level security from when they'd first arrived, it seemed like Keldorn definitely didn't take any chances. "Those runes," Ethan said, "motion sensors?" "Indeed." Fotham paused in front of one of the runes. "Experience has taught us, rather painfully, that certain demons may bend light to conceal their presence. These runes perceive their movement and render such sorcery quite useless." He led them down the final corridor, stopping at the first of several identical wooden doors. "Your chambers," he said, gesturing inside. High ceilings, polished wood, brass fixtures. For all their practicality elsewhere, Keldorn didn't skimp on hospitality either, though maybe that was practical in its own way when it came to housing important guests. The room itself was spacious enough, centered around a canopied bed that put their Jadaran accommodations to shame. A desk caught the afternoon light from tall windows, and a side door opened to what had to be a restroom, given the pipes running along the walls. "Damn," Miles whistled. "Sure could get used to this. We have 4 such chambers like this, reserved for diplomatic guests." He brought them to the other rooms, each one following the same layout. Miles tugged at his collar as they entered the third room. "A bit warm in this one, ain't it?" "Ah." Fotham moved to what first appeared to be metallic wall art, an ornate piece with flowing lines that, on closer inspection, formed a temperature gradient. He passed his hand over the left side, and a pleasant coolness began filtering through the room. The runes flickered as he adjusted the temperature. The closest analog would probably be one of those old analog thermostats, just with magic instead of mercury. Different principles, same basic idea. The rooms seemed comfortable enough, but something felt off. Were they really going to take separate rooms, leaving their backs bare to a bunch of strangers they hardly knew? Fuck no. If such private chambers prove unsuitable, perhaps I might show you our more commodious arrangements. Cole raised an eyebrow. Awfully on point, even for someone as keen as Fotham. Either their host had a doctorate in cold reading, or this world's list of impossibilities included telepathy, telekinesis, and the other various flavors of psychic power. Well, if Fotham was a telepath, he sure as hell didn't react to the image of the booty warrior and his plans for Chris Handsome that Cole had intended to subject them both to. The confirmation of mental privacy, unfortunately, wasn't quite worth being the only one stuck with that mental image. Yeah. Let's check those out." They walked down another corridor to a wider set of double doors. The commodious arrangements turned out to be a family suite. A central parlor opened up into multiple bedrooms, not unlike the setups in period dramas where aristocrats traveled with entire households in tow. Sunlight poured through tall windows that ran along a wall, bathing the living room. Lamps cast steady light from the corners, something closer to captured daylight instead of the flicker of flames or incandescence of bulbs. Fotham passed his hand near a runic panel on the wall, and the glow dimmed. The room stretched up to a high coffered ceiling. Felt weird being in a space this grand after months of cramped quarters, though even grand was an understatement. It was more like stepping into some alternate timeline where the Industrial Revolution found purchase with magic instead of steam. Miles seemed to have the right idea, sinking into one of the velvet armchairs with an appreciative sigh. Cole looked out the windows. They were 3, maybe 4 stories up, with a clear view over the castle walls to the city beyond. He'd expected something grimier, given all the Victorian aesthetic, but apparently he'd forgotten all about the other possibility. Gilded elegance. All the better for his lungs. Cole's lifespan probably went up a decade just knowing that this city wasn't some pseudo-London hellscape choking on industrial fumes. Domed structures, early skyscrapers and towers caught the sun, rising between buildings that wouldn't have looked out of place in London or Paris or Prague. But where those ancient capitals drowned in their own antiquated civil planning, this place seemed to have considered traffic larger than carriages from the get-go. Wide boulevards stretched between buildings like they'd been transplanted from Los Angeles, as if someone had built a European capital from scratch instead of piling it on top of 1,000 years of urban sprawl. The harbour in the distance was almost as impressive. Ironclads and wooden sailing ships bearing all manner of flags and designs dotted the water, numbering in the dozens. "Alexandria," Fotham said, his reflection appearing in the window. "While our capital cannot boast the vast expanses of Aurelia's cities or coffers, we pride ourselves on rather more practical achievements. Those cranes you see at the docks? A Keldonian innovation, as are the steam vessels that grace our harbours. Indeed," he continued, almost drunk on pride, "almost all the merchant houses and companies of the continent maintain offices here." Cole nodded, turning away from the window. Proper infrastructure, exclusive access to magitech, and heavy trade. It was the obvious recipe for small but loaded, yet Keldorn's apparent lack of colonial reach was curious, ethics aside. Did the demons truly have enough of their attention to curb the kingdom's ambitions, or was it something else? "The bedrooms are this way," Fotham offered. They entered the master bedroom first, easily twice the size of the singles they'd looked at earlier. Canopied bed, tall windows, private restroom, various other furnishings. A heavy wooden desk sat beneath a mirror with dials built into its frame. Similar runic constructions to those throughout the castle were etched into the metal, likely the scrying pane. The master bedroom alone would be more than enough, let alone the entire suite. The 3 other side bedrooms were smaller, but no less extravagant. At this point, calling dibs wasn't even necessary. But then, what was that other door down the corridor? The service passage. Fotham opened it, revealing a simple hallway. Though I dare say you'll find little purpose in it, save perhaps for giving the maids a fright. So, another entrance, or exit. Cole nodded, returning to the living room. The afternoon sun made it feel warm, cozy, well-earned. "All right then, 4 rooms, 1 for each of us, plus 1 for Mac when he's back on his feet." "Seems good to me." "Yup," Miles agreed. Cole glanced at Ethan. He gave a thumbs up. "Perfect." Cole turned to Fotham. "We'll take the suite." "Very good. Then allow me to show you the scrying pane." He brought them back to the master bedroom, stopping at the mirror mounted above the desk. When he turned one of the brass dials on its frame, the mirror's surface brightened with a magical glow. Each number upon the dial connects to its appointed chamber. He gestured to the reference card. "The guard posts occupy the first 4, followed by the throne room, infirmary, kitchens, and this floor's servants. Here is your own copy of the registry. I suggest you commit the essential numbers to memory." Cole accepted it, looking through the list. A directory system. Simple, practical, much like the simple ones hotels usually had. Fotham turned to the first position, and the mirror's surface rippled before showing 2 guards at their post. The image quality made early Skype look cutting edge. But hell, they'd solved video calls while their counterparts on Earth were barely on the telegraph. "Director," one of the guards nodded. "As you were." His image disappeared as Fotham returned the dial to the starting point. "When the mirror brightens and chimes, turn here from inactive to active. Return it so when you wish to end the connection." Fotham moved on to a second dial. "In times of urgency, turn to the first position. It shall alert all guard posts at once." Cole nodded. Before him were the essential features distilled to their simplest form. Ring, answer, hang up. Even included their little version of 911. And security. The mirrors are fixed in place and our chambers remain quite restricted. We've found no cause for concern these many years. Physical security, the original access control. Fair enough. When a network required line of sight and manual operation, hacking became a strictly literal affair. Have you any questions? The pain. Your chambers, Fotham asked. Miles and Ethan shook their heads. Think we're good, Cole said. You've been thorough, thanks. Very well. Your servants shall bring your evening meal in an hour's time. Should you require anything before then, they may be reached via position 8. Fotham gave a slight bow. Good evening, gentlemen. The door closed with a soft click. Time to familiarize themselves with Home Sweet Home. Chapter 6. Visitors. Miles immediately collapsed into one of the velvet armchairs in the living room, vest, pack and all. Well, hot damn. Rich don't even begin to cover it. And here I thought them Highland Park houses were something. Cole snorted. 1% versus 0.1, dude. And that's not even factoring the magic mirrors. Yeah? Hell, I bet they probably got some fancy-ass Victorian bidet in the bathroom too. Slap a water rune on there, shoot it right up your ass. Ethan tore himself away from the temperature runes. Wouldn't you like to know? Bet you're wondering if there's a pressure setting too. Oh, hell, Miles chuckled, raising up his arms. Come on now, that's all you. I ain't think up that shit. You did. Cole grinned, absently channeling that warmth he was starting to get used to. He formed a flat barrier almost subconsciously, about waist high. He moved it around. It might actually make transportation easier, if he could keep it steady. He lifted his pack onto the surface. It held, but getting it across was another story, like trying to carry a full cup of coffee without spilling. By the time he managed to float it over to the couch, his forehead was damp with sweat. Show off. Miles formed his own barrier. His pack slid right off the tilted surface. Well shit. Ethan's attempt almost made it onto a couch before his barrier yawed to the side, dumping his pack onto the floor. Easy making it, damn hard keeping it steady. Like training a new muscle. Shit, literally, Miles said, concentrating on his second attempt. The pack wobbled but stayed up this time. Hey, there we... Fuck. It slid off again. Cole glanced at their gear. We should probably start doing inventory. Figure out what we've got. Ethan opened his pack. Well, we've got an hour till food. Plenty of time to sort our shit out. Yeah, Cole looked around, plus some extra time to scope out our surroundings. Cole immediately got to work. It was the first chance they'd had to clean weapons since this whole mess started. His AK-74M was still caked with blood and sand from the construction site. Everything had been non-stop since the skyscraper, and continued even unto their second life. Mac in the infirmary, meeting the king, magic lessons, and then messing around with those oversized bolt actions. If there were any solace, it'd be the fact that the rifles were pretty usable, even if they'd never see 5.45 again. Got 3 mags, Miles reported, laying out his gear on a table. Dark flecks already marked the carpet where they'd left their bloodied equipment. His AKS-74U looked about as bad. 2 full, 1 partial. Shotgun's still good, though. Cole popped his dust cover. Shit was a mess. Construction site dust mixed with dried blood from those JNI fuckers shooting into the crowd. 3.5. Damn. 3 and change, Ethan said, stripping down his FAL. Even with their sidearms untouched, their remaining firepower wasn't anything to get excited over. These would be their last mags until, well, forever, probably. And there was no telling what else might come knocking. Quick clean now, full detail in the morning. Cole glanced at the stained carpet. Fuck it, not like they could make it much worse. The familiar routine helped clear his head a bit. Nobody had bothered them for at least half an hour, probably wouldn't until dinner. The remaining spread wasn't much to get excited over either. 3 frags a pop, plus 3 more if they grabbed Mac's stuff from the infirmary. Most of their flashbangs had gone into that high-rise breach. Cole had 3 left, Miles 2, Ethan 4, 3 breaching charges between them. Their demo kit was mostly intact, since they hadn't needed to blow that bomb, or anything else for that matter. NVGS checked out, still stowed away neatly. Comms would need testing tomorrow, see what range they could get in a castle. Medical looked all right, they'd hardly touched their individual first aid kits, and Mac's advanced one should last a good bit. Long enough to either learn healing magic or teach these guys how to make penicillin. Maybe both. He rifled through the rest of his pack, gripping a slim rectangular object. On the list of the many things he'd miss, this thing was somewhere up there. He pulled his Samsung from his pack. No service, fucking shocking. Still had juice, though. Calculator, camera, notes, cached manuals, even his Spotify downloads and Bloons Tower defense. Definitely worth keeping charged. Thank God for spare solar charges. At this point, they may as well be holy relics. Well? Miles set his cleaned AKS aside. Reckon these are just wall hangers now. Less 5.45 actually works on demons. Cole crossed to the windows, looking outside. Perfect view of the courtyard, as picturesque as any important noble might hope to see. But it was also exactly what you'd give soldiers you wanted to garrison. The stone window seat was a nice touch. Real fancy noble shit that just so happened to make a perfect head glitch for covering the gates. Though Nuketown window wars probably didn't compare to holding off literal demonic hordes. After today, wouldn't rule anything out. Miles stood up. Fair enough. Guess I ought to check out the service hall. I'll walk around a bit. See what else is up here, Ethan added. Cole nodded. Being stuck with checking out the suite wasn't all too bad. He probably would have done it anyway. He started with the usual spots, light fixtures, under furniture, behind curtains. Not that he'd recognize a magical bug if he found one, but he had to at least try. The heating runes in the corners seemed normal enough, same as the ones Fotham had shown them earlier, but fuck if he knew what else they could do. If they had magical listening devices, they weren't anything obvious. Though what counted as obvious in a place with scrying mirrors was anyone's guess. For all he knew, the king could watch them take a shit if he wanted to. He'd scoured the common areas and 3 bedrooms and had just started a sweep of the final one when Miles came back. Service hall loops around the whole floor. Got doors to at least 6 other rooms, all locked except ours. He dropped into one of the chairs, ran into a maid. They've got keys, use it pretty regular. Ethan returned as Cole wrapped up with the last bedroom. No neighbors. Got another suite next door before the hallway opens up. Same on the other side. Guards offered to show me around when they saw my vest. He tapped the bloodied American flag. This wing's for honored guests. Suppose that's us now. Got a decent view of the gardens on the other side. 3 knocks at the service door interrupted them. The smell hit Cole before he even reached the door. Well, damn. If whatever they were bringing smelled this good through castle walls, dinner might just make up for this shitstorm of a day. The kitchen tour had already reset his standards. After watching Marwin Cookery, MRES felt like some cruel culinary joke. Old habits kept his hand on the Glock 21 in his coat pocket as he approached the door. Service, if you please. Yeah, come in. He opened it carefully. She walked in with a service cart, pushing it along until they reached the dining area. If it pleases my lords, might I inquire as to your preference for service? I shall gladly lay out the courses with all proper ceremony, or, should my lords prefer, I might arrange the dishes for your private dining. We are, of course, most mindful that customs of service may differ in your lands of origin. Looking at the food now, Cole just realized there was no way of telling what the food's journey might have been. Maybe he was just being a bit paranoid, but he couldn't tell if the food had been poisoned. Okay, major faux pas incoming, but fuck it. What's worse, after all, a social fuck-up or 3 dead heroes? God, that was such a messed-up calculation to make over dinner, even if it was a real practical concern, even if the kingdom would absolutely prefer the first scenario. Could you… Christ, this would have been so much easier if they'd thought about going to the kitchen. Honestly, the real faux pas would be dying of poison because he couldn't ask someone to taste test. Pretty sure Emily Post never covered the etiquette of asking a server to die for you. But hey, the maid must have signed up for this, right? Would you mind tasting each dish before we serve? The maid barely hesitated before taking a small bite of each dish. Hell, maybe she moonlit as a food taster. Seemed like the kind of multitasking medieval staff would do. Or maybe they just trained for this shit. Either way, her face showed no tells. Nothing happened, though, just the same polite smile, like she taste-tested for upstuck dignitaries every other day. At least they'd been spared from hauling ass to Elena. That would have been one awkward conversation. Will my lords prefer the full service, or shall I arrange the dishes for private dining? Cole glanced at the others. Miles was basically on the verge of salivating like he belonged on my 600-pound life. He couldn't blame him. The last thing they'd had was what? A protein bar before their final pre-mission briefing. Just set it up casual, please. Of course, my lord. She began unloading the dishes onto the dining table. She also noticed the bloodstains on the carpet, but didn't say anything. No bad blood, hopefully. The spread put everything else they'd seen until now to shame. A nice steak dinner at Ruth's Chris or Laurie's. Nothing compared to this. First was the drell meat they'd smelled earlier, all wine-soaked and fancy. Then cave pheasant that looked like regular pheasant's goth cousin. Some kind of consommé with the marsh buck the cook had been on about. Warm bread that he wouldn't have minded stuffing a bag with if this were a cheesecake factory. We have marsh buck consommé with koreth root, she said, ladling it out. Wine-aged drell flanks with vis rub, eastern cave pheasant, and river fish in melted butter with shrolt. Master Marwyn prepared extra portions, considering the day's exertions. Nice. Magic probably burned calories like a motherfucker, so God knows they wouldn't just be stuffing themselves like gluttons. When you finish your repast, my lords, pray leave the cart in the corridor. It shall be attended to before dawn. Might there be aught else my lords require? Nah, we're good. Thanks for, Cole glanced down at the food. It is my pleasure. She gave a curtsy before leaving. Miles dug in before the door even clicked shut. Well, hot damn, fuck me sideways. That good? Cole grabbed a fork. The drell meat fell apart the moment he touched it. First bite and, wow. Okay. Yeah, this was definitely helping with the whole summoned to fight demons thing. Like Wagyu and wine had a baby. Miles was already halfway through his portion. Gonna turn into a damn beefer if we stay. Ethan snorted around a mouthful of pheasant. Not with the training Fotham's offering, I don't think. They demolished the food in comfortable silence. The consommé hit especially different. Something about hot soup after getting shot at just worked. Whatever marsh buck and koreth root were, the combo gave chicken noodle a run for its money. So, Miles wiped his mouth, finally slowing down. We gonna talk about this shit or what? What's there to talk about? Ethan said. Go back, die in Jadara, stay here, maybe die fighting demons. He raised his fork. Honorable too. Unless they take our souls or some shit. Yeah, fuck that, Miles agreed. Could say no to the Slayer thing, be regular citizens. Cole set down his fork. Not like the demons are gonna give two shits about that. You saw those rifles. They're not building them for fun. Could try somewhere else, Ethan said, but his tone made it clear he didn't buy it himself. Different city, maybe. With what money? Miles asked. What papers? Hell, what language? This here translation magic, far as I know, only works with Keldornian. Ain't got a Rosetta Stone for whatever gibberish they speak out there. Papers and language sure could be a problem, but if this were any other Isekai where the natives collectively fawn over new food, then Cole sure as hell got money covered. I bet we could probably make a fortune with the Chick-fil-A sauce recipe. Or even just good old ketchup. But who knows if they even got tomatoes here? Ethan shrugged. I mean, shit, they got apples, don't they? Ain't seen a tomato, though, but regardless, we really only have one option available to us. Fate fucking accompli, Miles muttered, pushing his empty plate back. Can't even be mad about it neither. They saved our asses. Shit, probably saved Mac's life too. But it ain't like that changes the fact we're stuck here with our dicks in the wind. Cole didn't like the fact any more than Miles did. It just so happened that the best logical decision turned out to be the one Seldorn wanted them to take. Yup, we're basically indebted to him. We've got weeks of training while Mac's out anyway. Might as well use it. So what, we tell the king we're in? Miles asked. Just like that? For now. Cole finished up his river fish and the shrimp-looking things that must have been the shrolt. See how training goes. Then we revisit our decision when Mac wakes up, see if he agrees. Ethan chuckled. Miles placed his empty plates on the cart. Man, y'all know damn well Mac ain't turning it down. Shit's basically a dream come true for him. True. Cole got up, stacking the rest of the dishware on the cart. He wheeled it into the service corridor, empty save for a few flickering lights. Returning to the living room, he spotted a little tea table by the window. Not exactly ADT, but those cups would make enough noise if someone tried any of the entrances. He dragged it closer to the main entrance, earning a weird look from Ethan. "What are you doing with—" "Ah, good idea." "Yup." Cole positioned it near the door, arranging the cups and saucers, bull in a china shop. Makeshift alarm. Ethan grabbed another table, bringing it toward the service corridor. Thank God Seldorn also seemed obsessed with Victorian tea culture, though why this was the case would likely forever remain a mystery. More convergent evolution. Isekai Englishman back in the day. Anyone's guess, really. Cole tested the setup by the front door. Yeah, those porcelain cups would wake the dead if someone tried sneaking in. But frankly, anyone who could magic their way past castle walls probably wouldn't bother with doors. All right, rooms. Doors all open, nothing obstructing them. Miles pointed to the room on the left, next to the master bedroom. "I'll take that one." Ethan took the one across from the master bedroom. "We sleeping in kit?" Cole considered it. Full gear would suck balls, but being caught with pants literally down would suck worse. Stripped down, plates nearby. They spent the next 15 minutes arranging furniture so anyone on watch would be able to see both doors from a window seat in the living room. All right, Cole checked his watch. 2,200 to 0100, 0100 to 0400, 0400 to 0500, 0700. That gets us up before their morning routine kicks in. He nodded to Miles. Garrett, second shift. Walker, third. Use the downtime to write shit down, anything that could help. Engineering, chemistry, tactics, basic science, whatever. Man, Ethan grumbled. Wish I'd brought one of those civilization restart books. Hindsight's a bitch, ain't it? Miles shrugged. Night, y'all. Night. Cole settled into his seat near the window. Sweet dreams, fellas. He pulled out a small notebook from his pack as they retired to their rooms. The courtyard below was well lit, torches supplementing whatever magic they used for the light bulbs. The natural lighting almost seemed unsettling, but at least he didn't have to strain his eyes looking down at his notebook. Where does one even start rebuilding modern knowledge from scratch? The stuff they'd seen today, those rifles, the healing magic, the strangely Victorian or gilded setups, it all pointed to a technological base that was advanced in some ways but had strange gaps in others. Like they speedran the Industrial Revolution using magic instead of pure steam power. Then there were the odd alignments with things an alien planet probably shouldn't be familiar with. 3 of their distance units being 3 feet, 60 of their weight units being about the same as 60 pounds. Well, he could probably skip the basic stuff. These guys probably knew all about trigonometry and algebra already, maybe even calculus. First things first, shit that would actually keep them alive. Partial derivatives could come after everything else, if he even remembered enough about them to write something cohesive. So weapons. Their current ammo wouldn't last forever, but with the gilded Victorian tech level here plus magic, proper smokeless powder wasn't impossible. Getting the nitration process right would be tricky, but he at least had somewhere to start. Maybe Miles or Ethan would be able to fill in the gaps or corroborate his info. He jotted down what he could remember on bullet weights, powder charges, primer compounds, and rifling patterns before wrapping up the section with disjointed notes. Medical came next. He hated thinking about it, but he had to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Mac's recovery wasn't a guarantee, and neither was the efficacy of healing magic. He needed to jot down everything he knew about proper field medicine, basic trauma procedures, wound management, anything he could remember about antibiotics from biology class. It wasn't as much as he'd hoped for, but it was something. Definitely better than if some random kid got isekai'd. Lord willing, they'd have Mac up and about to handle all this for them. Now, what next? Basic tactics wasn't a bad bet. Viet Cong shit would likely come in real useful. But what about more advanced knowledge? Proper radio theory and electromagnetics would be handy, especially if the Seldornians already had some sort of background, however rudimentary. And hell, if his knowledge of cymatics and physiology came in handy for magic, what else might? 3 sharp knocks fucked up his train of thought. Shit, right when he had a thought about energy conservation and magic. "My lords," the voice was gruff, authoritative, likely from a knight. "Urgent summons from His Majesty." Cole glanced at his watch. $2,350. The fuck kinda king held midnight? Wait, didn't he say something about using the scrying pane? Yeah, he definitely did. And unless the damn thing broke in the time between Fotham's demonstration and now, whoever was on the other side of the door must have been straight bullshitting. Cole set his pen and notebook down, swapping them out for his AK-74M. Everything seemed legit, not in some Hollywood too legit way, but in a genuinely authentic way. Shame Fotham's little sermons stripped their pro forma perfection of any legitimacy. But hey, maybe that was just his paranoia talking, seeing patterns in perfectly innocent midnight summons from a king who'd explicitly told them that he wouldn't be using midnight summons to reach them. Certainly wasn't suspicious at all that he'd do so at their weakest, when the exhaustion of nearly dying, dimensional travel and magical training would be hitting hardest. 3 more knocks, as polite as the first set. "My lords, His Majesty awaits." As good as their facade was, they wouldn't keep it up forever. Cole needed to buy time, enough for Miles and Ethan to get ready. Chapter 7, First Strike. "Yeah, we'll be there. Just, give us a few minutes to wake up and change." The same polite voice resounded from the door. "Of course, my lord. We shall await your convenience." Cole retreated to the bedrooms, shaking Miles and Ethan awake. Miles put on his vest. "What's going on?" "King allegedly wants to see us, so he sends goons to pick us up instead of hopping on the magic mirror." "Fucking A," Ethan grumbled. He readied his FAL. "Plan?" The keyhole ahead was big enough for a peek. He could try to get a look, but if these weren't actually knights, getting close to that door was asking to catch a bullet to the eye. Good thing they had a scrying pane. Perhaps the other guard posts would know. "Give me a second. I'll check in with the guards." Cole returned to the master bedroom, moving the dial to the first guard post. "Yes, my lord?" A bearded face appeared, torchlight flickering behind him. "Quick question. Did the king send anyone up to get us?" "No, my lord." The man frowned. "His Majesty retired hours ago. Has someone—" "Yes." Cole slapped the emergency rune before the guard could finish. Red light blazed across the mirror's surface. The pounding at the door started before the glow even faded. "Open this door." "Yo, they're getting antsy out here," Ethan called out as the china set up by the door rattled. Shit. The emergency alert worked both fucking ways, apparently. Another slam hit the door as Cole stepped into the living room. There went any pretense of legitimacy. These fuckers had just been waiting for an excuse. "Ain't looking good, Mercer." Miles flipped over a heavy table, taking cover behind it. Cole positioned himself beside Miles, flipping his weapons selector to auto before fishing out a flashbang from his kit. Yeah, no kidding. The door pounded again, splinters of wood flying off. The hinges were probably a few more hits from complete failure, maybe a minute before whoever was on the other side could force an entry. They needed a way out. The window was right there, bright moonlight spilling in, but, well, it probably wasn't the best idea. Sure, he'd managed to float his pack across the room earlier with barrier magic. Moving 30 pounds several feet without slipping had been hard enough. Trying to control a full descent down 4 stories would be suicide. And that was just him. Miles couldn't even keep his pack from sliding off his barrier, and Ethan's attempt barely fared better. Maybe shape the barrier into a box and give themselves an elevator ride. Cole created a small proof of concept, the blue glow confirming it could work. Still, though, it wasn't something he wanted to try unless absolutely necessary. Parachute fall? They weren't designed for unassisted falls, but what if they could strengthen their entire bodies with magic to absorb the shock? Same principle as their arms during training, but one screw-up trying magic they'd just learned today, and they'd be testing if those healers could put them back together. Not exactly Plan A material. Service corridor. Nah. Even if they could make a choke point out of it, all those locked doors meant they'd just be trapping themselves. They could try following the path into the service floor, but who knew what the layout was like? Not to mention getting some maids caught in the crossfire. Heroes probably shouldn't start their career by getting civilians killed. What else was there? Window was out, service hall was out, and staying to fight completely hinged on help arriving promptly. They just needed any way out of this box, one that Ethan's kit might just have a solution for. Walker, think you can make a hole into the next suite? Yeah, Ethan grabbed his gear, already grabbing a breaching charge. 4 minutes tops. 4 minutes never sounded longer, though it wasn't as if there were any better options. All right, we'll keep 'em busy. Let's just hope I'm tripping. For once, he actually hoped he was just being paranoid as fuck about these nights. If tonight was just a false alarm, he'd gladly take the L on that one, and possibly try to find schizomeds. Castle maintenance was sure to bitch about the wall, but either way they could take it up with whoever the fuck was trying to break down their door. A barrier materialized ahead of Miles, akin to Riot Squad transparent plastic, but glowing blue. The angle and shape were good too, just enough space to work the shotgun's barrel through. Another hit rocked the door. Hinges had already popped out of the frame. 1, maybe 2 more before they were gone entirely. Cole kept his thumb on the spoon of his flashbang and worked the pin out. The door exploded inward. The first observation to grace his eyes was the fact that yes, these guys were indeed knights. Brigandine armor, tabards, just like the guys they'd seen patrolling. 8 up front with swords, 2 in the back with older rifles, probably earlier versions of the ones they had messed around with earlier. For a split second, Cole wondered if he'd fucked up. If this really was some official business, and he was about to flashbang legit royal guards. But ain't no way did a mere summons demand a whole breaching operation, nor did it warrant the use of those big-ass anti-demon rifles. He was almost flattered they considered them that much of a threat, which they were, but fuck if it wasn't absurdly overkill. The 2 in the back raised their weapons, taking aim, and after all that talk about how bad they needed heroes, yeah, these definitely were not the king's men. As muzzle flashes lit up the doorway, Cole tossed his flashbang and immediately prepped a grenade. The concussion should have disoriented them, at least bought them a few crucial seconds, but these guys barely even flinched. Shit, they probably had that admittedly fantastic hearing protection under their helmets. The frag would have to do more work then. He tossed it over the front line, the little ball of death rolling right under the doorway as Miles let his shotgun ring. Blue barriers flickered into existence at shin height while he worked the pump. It was the type of shit Cole wished he could have had available to him. God knows how useful even a trick like this would have been. Coveting, let alone implementing, such cheap-ass moves might have hardly been fair or honorable, perhaps even unheroic. But it was damn effective, and all's fair in war, especially when the enemy couldn't care less about stealing away a solid night's sleep. The barriers caught their legs perfectly. First Knight hit it at a run, shins slamming straight into solid magic as the grenade detonated behind them. Somehow tripping up seemed more effective at slowing them down. High explosive plus frag coil in an enclosed space. That equation was supposed to equal chunks of dead motherfucker. These knights, it seemed, remained unfazed by it, barely staggering. Their unholy shrieks and the purple blood leaking through the gaps confirmed what he'd suspected in the split second they entered. They were not human. It also confirmed another important thing. If they could bleed, they could die. Good thing Cole decided to go full auto. His 5.45 zipped through their brigandine armor easily enough, and while it was a relief that modern ammunition could still hold its weight, it ultimately didn't matter when the rounds did jack shit. They penetrated, yeah, obvious enough given the blood flowing out, but they just kept pushing, absorbing the hits like they were nothing. 3 rounds center mass would fold any normal human. These fuckers barely slowed. 5 rounds into the same target and it still advanced. Damn near a half a mag later, and the monster was finally starting to stumble, but its sword arm was still trying to come up for a swing. He tripped it up with barrier magic to cover his reload. It was like trying to take down a bear with 9 million. Possible, but not advisable. Miles' buckshot fared a hell of a lot better with the sheer kinetic energy and pellet count, having sent 3 of their number sprawling already. 1 got close to the table, but he caught it clean in the face. The helmet went flying, and Jesus, Grey skin pulled tight over a skull that was all wrong, a human face melting into something not quite. Was this one of those demons Fotham had mentioned? The damn thing was basically a skinwalker, some really uncanny valley-type shit. Their disguises were falling apart now, that perfect royal guard illusion dissolving like a mirage. Maybe the magic couldn't hold up to the damage. Or maybe they just didn't give a fuck about keeping up appearances anymore. Either way, what pushed through that doorway was not fucking human. The swordsman Cole had expended his partial mag on, dashed straight for him, immediately throwing up a barrier, just a flat plane of blue force between it and Cole's fire. The next two did the same. Miles' buckshot splattered harmlessly against the shields, which visibly thinned and flickered but didn't crack. Fuck. They hadn't even killed one of them yet, and they were already pulling some Phase 2 boss fight bullshit. For all intents and purposes, their fight just went from a battle against some unnaturally powerful knights to a deathmatch against shielded alien super soldiers, sans the plasma guns and laser swords, and they didn't have power armor to even the scales. More pushed through behind them, each spawning their own protection, 8 of the sword-wielding bastards all rushing them. As big as the room was, it might as well have been a closet with how fast they moved. They wouldn't be able to hold the table for long. Not that it mattered anyway. To make a fucked situation even worse, the air suddenly went arctic right along the table, threatening to freeze their balls off. Whatever it was, Cole definitely wasn't sticking around for it. He and Miles jumped backward just as spears of ice erupted from the overturned tabletop. Should have fucking known they wouldn't stick to plain old swords. Sure, at some point he'd expected to see what actual combat magic looked like in Tenria. He'd been pretty damn curious about it even, just not a few hours after learning how to make a basic barrier. Not in a life-or-death slugfest. And now they were caught in the open, right in their enemy's line of sight. What the fuck could they do? Block those massive rifles with barriers they'd barely learned to make? Shit, maybe level 10 barriers would be enough, but risking their lives over it would be a fool's gambit. Getting the swordsman between them and the gunners, on the other hand. Cole shifted left, trying to keep the charging skinwalkers between him and their riflemen. It worked. Their own guys were blocking clear shots. Of course, they couldn't catch a damn break as their small victory was rendered completely moot by the inevitable closing of the gap. So much for keeping this a ranged engagement. At least proximity offered one consolation: the beautiful irony in how close quarters nullified their barriers. They couldn't exactly bisect someone with a wall of their own design in the way. Be it through dispelling the shield or simply pushing it to the side, if they wanted to attack, they'd first have to make themselves vulnerable. Coincidentally, the most vulnerable of the fuckers happened to be his first target. Purple still leaking from where his AK had punched through earlier. The monster raised its sword, shield dropping just like he'd hoped. Maybe being wounded made it expendable in whatever passed for their tactical doctrine, or maybe it was just too fucked up to swing fast enough. Cole put another burst through it, dodging back. The thing staggered but kept coming, still took another 2 bursts before it finally went down. Shit, he may as well be playing round 30 without Pack-a-Punch. Probably burned through another half a mag, including the subsequent security tap, which wasn't really sustainable considering he had 2 left. But hey, one less skinwalker to worry about. Miles had his own problems sorted. He faced the one he blew the helmet off earlier, catching it exposed mid-swing. The buckshot did what buckshot did best. Most of its head just wasn't there anymore, just gone with the fucking wind. Grey matter and bone fragments decorated the wall behind it, splattering what was probably a priceless painting. Oh well. The body dropped like a puppet, shield flickering out and sword clattering onto the floor. 2 down, a minor victory. Not incredible per se, considering the effort that went into killing just 2 of them, but force reduction was force reduction. At least they had just 6 swordsmen slashing around instead of 8. However, the skinwalkers' attacks were driving them apart, Miles getting pressured toward the kitchen while the other half pushed Cole deeper into the living room. The enemy was trying to divide and conquer, but there was little he could do about it. The living room, thankfully enough, was built for some nobles' fancy parties, plenty of space to work with, even with furniture scattered about. Another creature charged from behind a couch, blade swinging diagonally across. Cole angled a barrier to match, turning a killing stroke into a wide miss. The sword slid harmlessly past. A shadow stretched across the floor from the windows, another one trying to flank. Its thrust came straight on. Different problem entirely. No deflection angle would help when the point was coming right at his chest. Cole spawned a barrier offset to the side, catching the blade near its tip and forcing it to slide along the surface. The demon's momentum carried it forward, while Cole backed toward the center of the room, away from the corner they were trying to push him into. The third rushed his new position from behind a toppled armchair, coming in high while he was managing those deflections. Another barrier, another deflected strike, sword scraping off with a sound like steel on glass. Then the fourth pressed in from the direction of the front door, and his barrier wobbled before stabilizing. Fuck. This wasn't from magical strain, he had plenty left in the tank. Nah, this was just cognitive overload, too much shit to worry about. 4 different attacks, calculating angles, popping up barriers, trying to find an opening for his gun, managing positions. It'd probably be attrition that would fuck him over. And that's what made the next reprieve all the more appreciable. The one closest to him overcommitted, barrier nowhere to be found as it tried to take advantage of his tired guard. Cole had been waiting for exactly that kind of mistake. He emptied the last half of his mag straight into its skull, 5.45 rounds crashing into it in a spray of purple. He sidestepped as the body tumbled. 3 down, probably. But that still left way too many of these fuckers, and now he only had 2 magazines left. They weren't giving him any breathing room either, no chance to actually confirm the kill or adjust position outside of a few dashes. Cole hit his magazine release, arm already reaching for a fresh mag. The fencer that had lunged at him earlier came in for another strike. A barrier pushed the sword up and away, but then rifle fire cracked from the doorway. The rounds zipped past him, one striking the fencer square in the side. The shot ripped through the fencer, disintegrating it with the same brutality of a Bradley's autocannon on an insurgent. Gore splattered the dining area, scattered remnants of monstrous organs sullying velvet. One of the remaining 2 swordsmen got caught with shrapnel, sending it reeling. Hopefully dead, but Cole would more than settle for temporarily incapacitated. 4 down and 1 out of commission, and he hadn't even lifted a finger. But fuck him if anything ever came easy. As ice began crystallizing across the floor, Cole pirouetted away from the jagged spears that erupted where he'd been standing. Whether they'd seen it coming or he'd just been too caught up to see it coming, the result was the same. He'd walked right into their trap. In that split second of divided attention, a vice-like grip caught his arm. Chapter 8. Mind-blowing. The creature's glove clamped down on Cole's forearm, crushing it with the force of what was damn near an industrial press. His strengthening magic was the only thing keeping his arm intact, but that was a stopgap at best against this kind of force. He poured more mana into his arm, trying to reinforce the strengthening effect. The pain was tough to think through. White-hot pulses shooting up into his shoulder and down into fingers, which were starting to go numb. He spawned a barrier around the trapped limb in the same moment, trying to reinforce whatever structural integrity he had left. But even with both magical defenses, the relentless bastard's grip yet threatened to pulverize everything underneath. With his arm holding together, barely, he tried to bring up his AK. If he could just spray into this thing's face, the pressure might let up long enough to break free. The barrel started to rise, but the monster's other hand shot out faster than he could track, grabbing the handguard and yanking. His entire upper body lurched forward. In the same instant, it cocked its leg back. Shit. Cole diverted some mana into his stomach and chest, spawning a barrier just as its boot landed on him. For a split second, the pressure built like a garrote, rising almost instantly before the sling gave out with a sharp snap. His shoulder exploded in agony as the joint absorbed the full force of his body, going one way while his arm stayed anchored. Something tore deep inside, felt like he was literally getting disarmed, as if this were a fucking Mortal Kombat fatality. The rifle went flying somewhere behind the false knight, but he could hardly register that through the pain racing across the entirety of his left arm and torso. Then metal scraped as the creature's sword cleared its sheath. He reached for his coat pocket, snapping his Glock 21 up. First instinct was to end this whole problem, so he spammed the trigger. 2 rapid shots caught the monster square in the face before a barrier flashed into existence. The next string of 45 ACP splashed against the blue shield, sending it flickering but otherwise serving no greater use than throwing rocks at bulletproof glass. Cole stopped firing. He could probably break through the barrier with sheer firepower alone, but he had a more efficient idea. There was no way in hell he'd be able to pop some bullets in its skull, but their sword arms always came out vulnerable, had to, if they wanted to actually hit anything. Right on cue, the barrier dissipated, leaving the head and torso protected, but the sword arm open. It probably realized its own weakness and swung from the right, but all that did was give away the perfect opening. Yeah, fuck the barrier. Cole shifted aim to the arm. The 45 punched through the armor, dull violet spraying from the impacts. Each round hit with the kind of stopping power that'd usually fold someone, but this bastard barely seemed to care. Still, after 5 or 6 rounds, the sword dropped, probably more from mechanical damage than actual pain. Alas, the satisfaction of hearing metal hitting the floor was short-fucking-lived. The creature's face contorted into something horribly wrong, its jaw stretched wider than bone structure should allow, the teeth looking almost human, but not quite. More uncanny valley bullshit. Somehow, the grey skin and inhuman features were but honourable mentions compared to the unsettling nature of the teeth. They seemed almost designed, as if someone had taken a human mouth and repurposed it for pure hunting, an evolutionary mockery. It screeched, crying out with guttural bass and a pitched whine simultaneously. Cole kept shooting, but the creature didn't give a single shit about its mangled arm. With its sword gone, it instead pivoted and swung the wounded limb like a club. The strike came in faster than Cole could track, catching his wrist before he could avoid it. The impact felt like getting hit with a steel pipe. His hand went numb instantly. And the worst of it all, his Glock was sent flying somewhere into the chaos behind him. So now, that was his sidearm gone too, with half a damn mag still in it. No rifle, no pistol, shoulder about to snap, and his left arm was still caught in a hydraulic press of a grip. Wait, it seemed looser now. Cole glanced down at it. He couldn't see much, but the position of the grip was definitely lower than it had been earlier. The bastard must have lost some surface area when it kicked him. All the other realizations he'd had today paled against the saving grace before him. Cole poured more mana into his trapped arm, expanding the existing barrier. The monster's grip stayed just as tight, but now he had a bit more control over the surface it was actually holding onto. He continued until there was a small gap between his arm and the magical surface. The theory was simple. It'd be like pulling out an arm from a loose winter coat sleeve. The execution. Well, he wouldn't be surprised if he popped a vessel trying to squeeze out enough magic power to enlarge his makeshift sleeve. Fighting against that ugly bastard's strength was an idiotic idea. But an idea nonetheless. It was worth a shot at least. Better than letting this thing pulverize his arm or his face, given the messed-up baseball bat of an arm that now beelined toward him. He channeled strengthening into his legs and core. If he couldn't make the sleeve big enough, then pure mechanical leverage would have to do. The creature, at this point, still looked none the wiser. Perfect. Cole twisted and yanked with everything he had, streamlining his hand and arm for as smooth an exit as possible. His arm slipped free like it was greased or like the barrier was frictionless. The sudden release of pressure made him stumble backward, but he quickly regained composure. The monster was left clutching an empty barrier that just vanished. The look of confusion on its warped face was almost worth the throbbing agony still pulsing through his shoulder. But it wasn't enough. Cole followed through with his advantage, channeling strengthening into his right leg as he drove his foot into the creature's chest. The enhanced kick connected solidly, sending his opponent staggering back a few steps. Not much, but even a few feet of breathing room was a luxury he wouldn't take for granted. Though, breathing room meant jack shit when he was still basically unarmed, and his left arm felt like it had been through a trash compactor. The hell was he gonna do now? The grotesque skinwalker between him and his guns looked just as pissed before, maybe more, given the trick he'd just pulled. Nasty customer, and the one that got knocked down earlier was already forcing itself up. Miles looked to be faring a bit better than him, but the man had his own shitstorm to deal with. Getting help from him now would be impossible. Ethan, he wouldn't make it in time, and he had his own mission to do anyway. Damn it. He had to end this quick before things got exponentially worse. His knife was still on his belt, and he had grenades. Actually, maybe the knife could work if he amped up his strength with magic. More force behind each strike, better chance of punching through. But shit, that was just theory. Was he really gonna bet his life on untested knife-fighting techniques? Absolutely fucking not, especially not against armor that looked like it was designed to repel blades and claws alike. Especially not when he hadn't actually gotten the chance to recover his energy outside of a mana drink. Hell, his head was already starting to pound again, any more and he'd probably keel over in a seizure. Even if he could pull it off, these things ate 5.45 like it was airsoft. Multiple far-fetched stabs through armor just to maybe hit something vital, all while its buddies closed in on him. Might as well try fighting a family of bears with a box cutter. The grenades weren't much better. These bastards had already shrugged off explosions that would have turned humans into confetti. Standard frag basically just pissed them off. Though, if he was going to have to get close anyway, he almost dismissed the ludicrous idea, but fuck if it wasn't actually the most promising and, quite honestly, most badass thing he could think up. What else did he even have? Barriers barely slowed them down, bullets just pissed them off unless he wasted a mag, and his experimental knife fighting could definitely wait for another day. On the other hand, shoving a grenade in this thing's face would be a hell of a coup de grace, if only he could manage to pull it off. Cole reached for a frag grenade. Getting grabbed again was a risk he really didn't want to take. One more squeeze, and he might actually need that arm regrown. His current mortal enemy charged before he could fully work out the timing, its jaw unhinging in another screech. Shit, if it wanted a meal that bad, he'd give it a real banger. The spoon stayed pressed under his palm while he yanked the pin free. The damn thing's maw gaped wider as it approached, ready to take his head off. Cole strengthened his right arm, muscles burning with the sudden surge of power. He dunked the grenade down that orthodontic nightmare like he was trying to posterize someone. A barrier snapped into place over its mouth before it could even try to throw it up. Might as well seal the present inside. Cole spawned another at its feet while channeling mana into his legs. No way the bastard was going to get away from what was coming. His strengthened kick caught it dead in the back. The thing tripped over the barrier, eating shit face first into the floor. The contained blast did exactly as physics dictated. Instead of spraying outward like a standard grenade, all that force had nowhere to go but through the bastard's skull. Purple mist and chunks of flesh painted the ceiling in a cone of gore. The body stayed down this time, no more getting back up after that. Time to get his weapons back. His AK was first priority, not like he was going to find his Glock in all this chaos. He snatched up the rifle, checking his remaining mags, one in the weapon, one on his vest. Terrible odds. That's when he spotted the sword the monster had dropped earlier. Shit, when was the last time he had used one of these things? A faint shimmer ran along its edge as he picked it up. Some kind of enchantment, maybe. Way better than trying to make do with his KABAR and some barriers if things got close again. He slid the blade through his belt on his left side. Not ideal, but he couldn't waste time wrestling the scabbard off the corpse. A sharp crack echoed from the hallway behind them. "Let's go," Ethan called out. Smoke and debris billowed from the fresh hole in the bedroom wall. Ethan dove through first, followed by Miles. "Covering." Round from Ethan's FAL zipped past Cole as he broke for the breach. Through the debris cloud, one of the false knights rushed after them. Its barrier flashed blue as Ethan hammered it. The 7.62 rounds cracked through after maybe the 8th shot, the blue plane shattering with an ear-shattering whine. The subsequent shots hit center mass, spraying purple. Miles's shotgun finished what Ethan started. The creature's head disappeared in a spray of blood while Ethan reloaded. Through the breach, the adjacent suite looked empty. Clean beds, untouched furniture. Cole swept through it by himself while Miles and Ethan held the line, taking full, albeit temporary, advantage of the choke point the breach offered them. Their weapons kept echoing as Cole approached the suite's exit. The sound of sustained fire told him enough about how their rear security was going. He laid a hand on the doorknob, keeping his AK ready. Of course, the moment he cracked the door, he damn near ate a rifle round to the face. One of those big anti-demon guns pointed right at him from the hallway. He squeezed the trigger while throwing himself backward, spraying through the doorway. The first few bullets caught the monster in the chest, more ripping through its throat and jaw as he moved. The thing's return fire went wide, but fuck if Cole was going to give it another chance. He continued emptying the mag onto the downed creature, pausing his fire only to address a new threat that had appeared in the doorway. Shit. He swiveled his weapon up, but its sight was already on him. No time to dodge, and he sure as shit wouldn't be able to block one of those damn cannonballs. The best he could do was throw up a half-assed barrier to nudge its aim. He spawned one at the rifle's barrel, pushing it to the side. It fired, still aimed in his general direction. The round caught something, slammed his AK sideways with enough force to stagger him. His brain went straight to getting shot, that split second of his life movie playing, before realizing he could still breathe, that he could still feel his body. No blood, no pain splitting through his torso. Did he get lucky? Cole glanced down. Yeah, his chest was intact, all right. But the AK, it looked torn to shit. The round must have grazed it. The gas tube was shredded where the bullet had ripped past it, taking a chunk of metal with it. He worked the charging handle anyway. AKs were pretty famous for eating shit and asking for seconds, but he was probably asking for too much by now. Complete failure to feed, as expected. Of course, the rifle was toast. Got her at least even the playing field. Cole drew his sword, channeling mana into the blade, just like he had with the rifle at the armory. Maybe if he could close the distance before it got another shot off. Yeah, one good hit to that rifle, and they'd both be stuck with medieval options. He lunged forward, propelling himself with strengthened legs before he swung his blade up in a powered arc. The enchanted metal struck the last rifleman's weapon just below the magazine. It didn't cut through, but the impact knocked it loose from the well. The force of the blow probably fucked up the internal feed mechanism too, maybe even warped the bolt. Either way, that thing wouldn't cycle right anymore, even if the bastard managed to get another mag in. But 3 more of his buddies materialized in the doorway, blades already drawn. Shit, they'd started out facing 10 of these abominations. If they'd eliminated 6, and 3 were still behind the breach, who the hell were these newcomers? Cole fell back through the living room, regrouping with Miles and Ethan just outside the bedrooms. As much as he'd like to believe he could take on 4 opponents with his sword, Cole wasn't exactly itching to test that theory. Between the shoulder that felt ready to fall off and these things being basically medieval Terminators, it probably wouldn't end well. 4 contacts, front door. 3 new reinforcements, I think. Fuck's sake. 7 left then, Miles groaned. He spared a glance at Cole, raising an eyebrow. Where the fuck's your gun? Cole had almost forgotten he'd been gripping that sword. It's cooked. Miles reloaded his Benelli M4. I've still got another tube left. He pressed his AKS onto Cole, plus 3 extra mags. Santa must have come early this year, but as much as Cole welcomed the offer, all it did was slightly alleviate already terrible circumstances. They were running on fumes, both physically and magically. Well, Ethan probably still had juice in the tank, but that wouldn't mean shit once his last mag ran dry. Boxed in and surrounded with no way out. Déjà vu kicked in as Cole assessed their options, or spectacular lack thereof. Hell, unless they were going to get Isekai'd a second time, they were screwed. Miles had seen it coming the moment they landed. Same shit, different toilet. Chapter 9, Locked In. One group of monsters by the breach, another by the doorway, and not enough ammo to deal with either. Oh, if only the situation were conducive to a happy ending. Cole checked the AKS in his hand. Well, maybe they did have enough ammo to deal with one of the groups, but only if isolated. Man, fuck the demons. Hell, we should have taken the king's deal. Miles shifted his grip on his shotgun. Amen to that, Ethan said. What's the plan, Mercer? Their best bet was to push through one side, likely the breach side, since they'd already been in the mud with them, but how long would that take? The ones pushing in from the suite would undoubtedly shaft them before they could take down all 3. The window, maybe? Nah, that was still solidly a fuck no. Another breach? They wouldn't have the time. The service corridor. Shit, it might actually work now. Tight quarters were usually a death sentence, but Cole had already trashed the monsters' rifles. All they'd need to do is send rounds down the corridor, then potentially blow past a doorway if they still needed to run. Service corridor, one long choke point. The AKS felt too light in his hands. He'd kill for his M7 or even a good old M4 right about now. Fuck it, Ethan agreed. Cole backed up to the service corridor, keeping his AKS trained on the hallway connected to the main suite. The damn things should be coming in right about now. The gunfire hit like a thunderclap. The fuck? Those were Seldornian rifles, but much greater in volume, too much for the two who'd had rifles earlier. Cole immediately dropped into a crouch. He fought through the pain in his left hand as he opened the door to the corridor behind him. Miles remained still in his peripheral vision. He still kept watch over the breach. Something massive hit the floor in the main room, the impact rattling the walls hard enough to shake the entire suite. Another crash followed alongside a shriek that lasted a good microsecond before being cut off. It was just gone, like someone hit a mute button. The sustained fire kept up for maybe a couple seconds, 8 shots in total, 2 for each monster out in the suite maybe. More shots cracked from the breach behind them, more shrill, abruptly silenced cries piercing through the deafening booms. This had to be the castle's guards responding to the alert. Who else could the monsters be fighting? Who else could they be dying to? The gunfire ceased, but the tinnitus was pervasive as ever. Man, he should have grabbed one of those steampunk-looking ear pros from the range when he had the chance. Through the ringing, a long whistle carried from the entrance. An answering whistle echoed from behind the breach. Thank fuck. That was basic communication, position check between units. The monsters that had threatened to overrun their position barely a minute ago were nowhere to be found, likely shot dead by the mysterious benefactors whistling to each other. Unless this was some sort of convoluted 4D chess play, they might actually have backup. Lieutenant? Cole maintained his line of sight. That you, Fotham? I should think so, unless these fiends have some rather brilliant strategy in mind. For what demon, having mastered our arms at last, would not immediately set about reducing its own kind to ruin? Yeah, that was Fotham all right. He had a good point. If they were another batch of those skinwalkers, why would they kill each other? Why waste time yapping instead of pushing in to finish the job? False flag, doubtful. Might as well see what had happened. All right, hold fire. We're coming out now. The scene that greeted him as he stepped out of the hallway made their earlier firefight look like a paintball match. Their 5.45 and 7.62 had punched clean holes. The guards' rifles had torn entire chunks out of the monsters instead. One by the door was basically bisected, its torso opened up like someone had taken an Apache's chain gun fire chest on. The fancy furniture hadn't fared much better, looked like a recreation of the lobby scene from The Matrix, but with artillery instead of small arms. Fotham stood in the center of a formation, flanked by the bearded guard from the scrying pane. Only when they lowered their weapons did Cole finally allow himself to relax. Miles whistled as he emerged from the hallway. Great fucking timing. Guards moved around the room, shoving and twisting their swords into each corpse. The bodies were barely recognizable as the knights that had forced their way into their suite earlier. Whatever glamour they'd used had completely failed, leaving only their true, fugly forms sprawled through the wreckage. The purple gore splattered throughout the room would probably render it, or perhaps even the entire wing, unusable for a while. Some of the bodies had limbs and parts hanging by muscle fibers, literal threads. But that wasn't even the worst part. That handedly went to their uncanny faces, frozen in horrid expressions. Shit, it'd probably belong in some creepypasta hall of fame. The plan had been to push through to the service corridor, but now he had a bigger concern. Mac, the infirmary dash. Already secured, Fotham answered. It seems all the demons consolidated here to see you dead. How many did you get? Cole asked. Fotham pointed to the 4 new smears sitting around the suite's living room. 4 here. Another guard approached, coming from the direction of the breach. My lord, we've slain 3 demons in the other chambers. No sign of further intruders. 7 total then, plus the 6 they'd killed earlier. That meant all 13 fake knights had been eliminated, unless there were more infiltrators hiding around. Yeah, looks like you got all the ones we found. Fotham nodded. Now then, Lieutenant, I believe we should get you and your team to the infirmary. That arm needs attention, and I imagine you'd like to check on your friend. I trust you can explain how this began. Yeah. Following Fotham out the door, they walked past patrol after patrol of castle guards. Started around midnight. We got a knock at the door, your knights supposedly. Said that His Majesty had summoned us. Urgent business, couldn't wait. Most urgent indeed, that they might bypass proper protocol. Yeah, that's how I knew. You know, I probably wouldn't have been able to tell otherwise if not for the question of their presence. Why were they even here? They knew every detail of palace etiquette, responded perfectly to each question, even adjusted their approach when I pretended to cooperate. Hell could have fooled me, Miles added. He kept his weapon down, but kept a hand near his weapon's ejection port, probably to ghost load it. Complete discipline till the alert anyway, Cole continued. Then they dropped the act, started banging on the door. The moment that door went down, they went on the offensive. Weird thing was, though, even after their facade dropped, they used tools like humans would, guns, swords, magic. Didn't use 'em great, but the fact they could use 'em at all. Most troubling indeed. For the first time since Cole had met him, Fotham's aristocratic polish cracked. We've heretofore encountered cunning demons, yet naught like this. We've learned them to be creatures of instinct, at times with the intellect of any predator, but of instinct nonetheless. He shook his head, continuing, that they should comprehend our weaponry is disquieting enough. This is new. Never before have we observed demons possessed of such faculty for mockery. Skinwalkers, Miles suggested. More like a... Ethan rubbed his chin, stalling, searching for the right word. Finally, he settled. Mimics. Though it looks like they've skipped the treasure chest and grimoire evolutionary phase. Mimic? Perhaps it may fit, unsettlingly well. I must concede, though an affront, their craft is disturbingly fine. A jest at our expense. Cole's shoulder burned as the adrenaline started wearing off, sharp stabbing pain whenever he moved it. Torn ligaments, maybe. His forearm felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire, static shooting through his fingers when he tried to make a fist, nerve compression. He shifted his weapon to a one-handed grip, his left arm hanging damn near useless. Even gravity hurt like a bitch. The shoulder was definitely fucked up, maybe even dislocated. Thank God they'd just arrived at the infirmary. Thank God Mac was safe. There he was, still in his bed, still breathing, still alive. Apparently the demons hadn't even bothered touching the infirmary. They probably wrote off Mac as a non-issue given his condition and instead gathered their forces just for them. Still, it was a relief to see the man safe and sound, with 4 guards watching over him like guardian angels at that. One of the healers, not Elena, some older woman, immediately made for Cole's arm. I'm Dr. Halloway, and it shall be my honor to see you mended. My lord, if you'd be so kind as to sit. Cole Mercer. Cole dropped into the indicated hospital bed, keeping his eyes on Mac. Thanks, Doc. My arm, a demon gripped it pretty damn hard. I'm lucky it didn't take the arm clean off. The doctor took some notes while a younger guy handed him some strange-colored drink, another potion. For the pain, sir. Cole eyed the mixture, yet another mystery drink. There was no way of knowing what passed for painkillers here, but these folks seemed to know what they were doing. Fuck it. He downed it in one go. The effect was immediate, pain fading to a dull throb as warmth spread through his chest. Then came the floating sensation, like the edge of a really good morphine dose, but without the complete mental fog. Fotham pulled over a chair, settling down beside them as the woman carefully removed his sleeve and started with regular checks, pressing specific points, testing range of motion. Ah, Cole grunted, shoulders dislocated. The doctor nodded, jotting down a note. Indeed it is. Your arm has suffered much, and this shoulder joint fares no better. The ball has been forced from its proper place, a dislocation, as you've pointed out. Fortunately, that alone appears to be the extent of your mechanical injuries. Cole almost felt like sighing, but he wasn't out of the woods just yet. If anything required internal imaging or surgery, he'd probably be fucked. How would they even diagnose any deeper issues? Before I restore the joint, however, we must first tend to these other injuries. Now I shall guide a flow of mana through your veins to better understand your condition. Do remain still and pray, resist not. Any disruption might obscure what I seek to uncover. So that's how they got by without imaging. She channeled a trickle of mana into Cole's collarbone, directing it through his injured arm until it reached his fingers. Warmth flowed along his bloodstream, no issues with just the trickle. The numbness in my fingers is probably nerve compression, Cole offered. Would have crushed my arm completely if I hadn't used strengthening and barrier magic. A wise precaution indeed, Sir Cole, the healer replied. You've certainly spared yourself a graver injury, though what remains mustn't be ignored. I shall now increase the flow of mana. Pray, remain still. The first anomaly presented itself almost immediately. The warmth of mana snagged near the shoulder joint, faltering sharply at the back of the joint and consolidating there. That confirmed the dislocation. All right. The healer inserted new mana past that, starting with the upper shoulder instead of the clavicle. His biceps and triceps seemed perfectly fine, but faltered again near the middle of his forearm, right where the demon had gripped him. The warmth congested, creating a dull ache where the flow faltered. Another obstruction, she observed. Swelling, hematomas, I'm guessing, Cole offered. Accumulation of blood, yes. Dr. Halloway intensified the mana flow, directing it toward the blockage. The warmth pressed harder until, it burst through all at once, sending a rush of sharp relief down his arm. There, the flow resumes, though the tissues remain inflamed. I'll heal this momentarily, but first, allow me to check for any other obstructions. She ran the mana through Cole's arm again. The bone itself remains whole, fortunately. No scattering, no cold voids, the hallmarks of fractures are absent. I find only bruising here, no breaks to the structure. And bleeding? Internal, I mean. The healer inclined her head. Were there ruptured vessels, the mana would stagnate completely. Here it flows, however diminished. The swelling arises from strain alone, not internal bleeding. The healer's smile as she looked up was probably one of the most reassuring things he'd seen today. The finer structures remain sound. This confirms what I suspected. The damage is superficial. Now let us address these injuries. The healer began her work. A blue glow graced her hands, warmth spreading into Cole's forearm as he turned to Fotham. These mimics, I'm guessing these demons are new then. Fotham sunk into his seat. He looked like he at least retained a modicum of composure, but Cole didn't need telepathy to know that he was dealing with the potential end of the world. Yes, was all he could say. Well, I sure am looking forward to a shapeshifter shanking me in my sleep. Not the best thought, but hey, at least he could move his fingers now without a bombardment of static. His delivery also seemed to lighten Fotham's mood a bit. A fair concern, and one not without merit. Though perhaps such an illusion, if indeed it is an illusion, would demand a steady flow of magical energy to sustain. A costly trick, I'd wager. He stood from his seat. What, you got something? Cole exhaled through his teeth. Dr. Halloway's magic now had the tissue in his arm wriggling around, like a damn chestburster ready to pop out and say hi. As futile as ignoring it was, he tried anyway. Our nullification fields, yes, we use them to suppress magical interference, Fotham motioned the bearded guard over. You there, organize a team to fetch what nullifiers may be spared from the dungeons and laboratories. Test every soul in the castle, starting with those here in the infirmary. The knight offered a shallow bow and moved to assemble others. Turning back to Cole, Fotham's tone softened, though his words retained their bite. Now you'll remain here. This is now the most secure location at our disposal. And you, well, you have the look of a man who's had sport enough for one night. I'd not burden you further. Rest well. We shall discuss further on the morrow. Yeep, Cole winced as Dr. Halloway finally popped his shoulder back in. Fotham prepared to leave, but Ethan called out before he could take another step toward the door. Wait, we gotta grab what's left of our gear, if any of it survived. Could use some of them rifles y'all got too, Miles added, and them ear pros while we're at it. I'll see to it. His Majesty approaches. The call came from outside, followed by the sharp sound of boots hitting tile as guards rushed to position. The patrol outside the infirmary doors snapped to attention. King Armand entered with his personal guard. Their brigandine wasn't the usual scaled armor Cole had seen on regular guards. The scales had some iridescent sheen he hadn't seen before, reinforced with some silvery metal that was probably mithril or some other fancy fantasy material. High-end shit, undoubtedly. Wouldn't surprise him if those scales came from an actual dragon or something equally legendary. Fotham bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, a most timely arrival. I believe I may have devised a means to unmask these infiltrators." He relayed the same plan he'd given the bearded guard. That got the king's attention real quick. "Very well. See that it's done swiftly." He turned his attention to Cole and his team as Fotham left. Despite sobering up a bit from his slumber, the half-elf king still looked like he'd aged a decade since their first meeting, which couldn't have been more than, 12 hours ago. "Lieutenant Sergeants, I'm relieved to see you well after the recent incursion." "Could be worse. Suppose we ought to be glad we ain't heading out in body bags," Miles said deadpan. He didn't mince words, not at all, and Cole couldn't really blame him. At least his tone was polite enough to avoid trouble, if only just. Cole braced, but nothing happened. Of all the reactions he could have expected, regret wasn't one of them. Accountability even less so. A tragedy, were it so. It was no failure of your own that placed you in such danger. You have my word on that. Whether it came from genuine concern or just the cold calculus of keeping his best assets alive, at least the king gave enough of a shit to say it. Words were cheap, even sincere ones. But it was more than he expected. "Though you were not yet sworn to the service of Seldorn, you fought as if you were," Armand continued. "It is no small thing to rise so readily against an enemy that sought to unmake you ere you might render a decision. Few men would have done so, and for your valor you have my deepest commendation." Words like these were nothing new, or so Cole thought. Polished speeches from polished men, always meant to rile up a crowd, instill purpose, instill a sense of honor. But be it through authenticity or tact, the king's words somehow felt different. "Though I cannot restore to you the night, I would extend to you the morrow. I will not intrude further, nor would I think ill should my kingdom's shortcomings weigh upon your thoughts. Rest and be untroubled by imposition or demand." Armand turned to leave, but the truth was, Cole didn't need another night to think it over. At this point, Seldorn didn't even need to sweet-talk them with a quid pro quo or burden them with unsettled debts. These demons had made it pretty damn clear what they thought of Earth's finest crashing their party. Honestly, it was pretty smart of them to try and eliminate the kingdom's heroes before they became a threat. Too bad all they'd done was make it personal, and now they'd learn exactly why trying to kill them early was the right instinct. "Your Majesty, no need to wait till tomorrow. We're in." Chapter 10, In the Bag. Consciousness returned in stages, first the phantom throbbing in his shoulder, then the realization that the sunlight hitting the far wall came from directly overhead. Shit, was it afternoon? Head was clearer than it had any right to be, though, given the doses of strange medicine the healers had given him. There was none of that post-morphine dissociative haze, no residual narcotic fog. Instead, Cole simply felt well-rested, with full awareness. Now this part of Keldornian medicine he could get behind. None of that horror show that came with watching flesh knit itself back together. He rubbed his eyes. The first face he registered was a pretty one, though he still wasn't used to how elves made pretty look almost alien. Nice way to wake up, though, even if it was well past morning. There was something familiar about her, though. Right, Dr. Gracer from their arrival, Alina. Must have taken over from Halloway after last night. She was bent over his arm, hands aglow with soft white light. "Ah, Lieutenant Mercer, you're awake. How do you fare?" Cole tested his shoulder. It had a surprising range of motion. Still hurt a bit, but it was definitely more manageable compared to last night. Maybe like the difference between a fresh injury and a week of proper rehab, somehow compressed into a few hours. Like a demon tried to tear off my arm. Better than it should be, though. Elena smiled. Well, most who endure the misfortune of a demon's assault fare worse still. And though you're hardly in a position to attempt it at present, I must insist you refrain from any strenuous magic for the next several hours. You've just recovered your mana. It wouldn't do to once more succumb to exhaustion. Definitely ain't planning on it, Doc. Cole shifted. He was going to ask something since he was here. What was it? He'd been meaning to since they first dropped off Mac. Say, any sicknesses I should watch out for? You know, being from somewhere completely different and all. Elena tilted her head. You speak of foreign maladies. I assure you, there's no cause for concern. I've not heard a story of any summoned hero suffering ill effects. Though, should you request it, I can continue to monitor you. Shit, that's good to know. Yeah, I think we'll take you up on that offer. Anyway, what time is it? Cole groaned. 2 in the afternoon. Strange how the similarities kept piling. Units of measurement, from feet to pounds, and now this? Well, he'd probably get to the bottom of it one day. Cole set the thought aside and glanced at the stand beside him. The empty vial of blue liquid was probably the reason why his new organ didn't feel fucked, why his head felt clear. Across the room, Ethan was knocked out in his bed, clutching a pillow while mumbling something about Lizzie. Damn, Cole had almost forgotten, not about being summoned. It was hard to forget that part, but about what it really meant. Somewhere back home, Ethan's wife would be getting the full military widow treatment, 2 Class A's on the doorstep with a chaplain in tow, one of those folded flags that made everything worse, followed by carefully curated words about duty and sacrifice. As if the right combo of honor and service and other platitudes could fill the hole left when learning her husband would never be coming back home. Macy would be getting the same notification too. And Mom. And Dad. His little sister, who'd endured years of operational blackouts, clinging to stupid 3 a.m. meme texts just to know he was alive, would find herself back in that familiar hell. And now Macy, of all people, would join that exclusive club nobody wanted membership in. Uniformed strangers at the door, shattering her world with the news about her brother. Except he, Ethan, Miles, and Mac weren't actually dead. They'd been saved by a miracle. Hell, Ethan was right here, alive and whole, murmuring his wife's name while sleeping off a night of keeping demons from murdering them in their beds. Then again, saved was probably a semantic stretch when factoring in all the bullshit they'd been through. And Miles? He probably had his own way of processing it all. Compartmentalization, flipping the switch. Pieces of his shotgun lay scattered across a white towel, glistening clean and free from demon blood. It was a common ritual, one Cole had done himself a few times. If he just kept his hands busy, he wouldn't have to think about shit, just the next objective after the next. Miles fit the Delta paradigm well enough. No wife to wait for him, no kid to bring him home, only an empty apartment and the ghost of a mother's prayers. He had his team, sure, but outside the missions. When the adrenaline faded and the silence crept in. Some men turned to God in those moments. Miles. He hadn't yet, but he probably should. The empty plate beside him said everything about how this was going. That kind of emptiness had an expiration date. As unsustainable as it was, though, it did its job. Push through one more objective, zip past another hour without facing the void. And Cole's growling stomach did just that. But it was Elena's voice that truly pulled him back from the abyss. "Famished, are you?" she asked with a smile. "It was quite a night, or so I've heard. Sit tight, I'll fetch something from the kitchens. Do you care for aught in particular?" Cole glanced at Miles's empty plate. "Aye, Garrett. What did they hook you up with?" "Standard breakfast, something damn close to a Waffle House all-star. Got the bacon, eggs, bread, sausages, some waffles, you know. And you ain't gonna believe this, they got actual miso. Like real, legit Japanese miso." Cole raised an eyebrow. Given everything else he'd seen in this place, miso didn't seem that weird. But Miles had gotten him with dumber shit before. "Dead ass?" "Dead ass. Ain't lying, ain't got a reason to. See for yourself." "He speaks true," Elena chimed in. "That would be Aurelia's doing. Their merchants bring such delicacies through the port often." Aurelia. Fotham had brought it up yesterday, some wealthy foreign empire that the Keldornians didn't seem to like much. How'd they even get miso? There's a rumor that one of their summoned champions introduced the recipe, perhaps a century past. So summoning magic had been used before. Wasn't much of a surprise, given how prepared the kingdom was, but it lent credence to the theory he'd been cooking up for why the whole place seemed so Victorian. All right, guess I'll have the standard breakfast then, plus the miso. Very well. Elena headed for the door. Barely a couple minutes after she left, the infirmary door opened again. Cole looked up expecting breakfast, but instead there was Fotham hauling backpacks. Though to label them simply backpacks hardly did them justice. Runes traced the major seams, load-bearing points mostly, and there were crystal slots, just like their rifles had, positioned wherever those runic patterns intersected. Lieutenant, sergeants. Fotham approached the beds. I trust you're recovering well? Cole sat up in his bed, studying his face. Getting there. Though it looks like you might need to spend a night here too. Perhaps I ought, when the castle's been purified. Fotham set down the rucksacks, then lowered himself into the chair between them with a slack posture, as if even sitting required effort. We've uncovered 2 more demons playing at guards, this time posted at the western gate. Rest shall come later, should fortune deign to care for my plight. Wait. Miles stopped working on his shotgun. Yul went over the kitchen. First place we checked. Fotham gave what might have been a chuckle if he'd had more energy. Fear not. Were your food poisoned, I assure you, you'd not have made it past the first bite. Miles frowned. Huh? Half the castle has been scoured, the infirmary itself, along with the service floors, kitchens, and guard posts within its immediate vicinity. You've no cause to leave the secured zones, indeed I should think it inconceivable, but should necessity demand otherwise, you need first pass through the nullification field checkpoint at the main entrance. I trust that is clear. As day director, Cole pointed at the bags. So what's with those? Ah yes, Fotham straightened slightly, picking up one of the bags. Given recent events, it seems only fitting to equip you as befits slayers of the office. These packs bear enchantments, standard issue. Cole got out of his bed and studied the bag. Up near the top sat a familiar crystal socket, same basic setup as the rifles. Purple runes clustered thick around the straps, with more running through the back where the weight usually tried to pull on the spine. Smaller arrays circled the zippers and clasps, probably keeping things stable when loaded up. Weight reduction, I'm guessing? Precisely. It was hard to tell if Fotham was juicing his muscles with magic when he lifted a pack with 2 fingers. Though I might caution you, the runes negate the pull of gravity, but the object's natural force remains. Much like a drifting boulder, weightless, yes, but still quite capable of smashing you flat should it gain sufficient speed. Cole thought of the recent Artemis videos, astronauts picking up 100-pound equipment like it was nothing, then struggling to stop it from drifting. Right. Don't throw it around like it's empty. Picking one up, he unzipped the main compartment. Considering how these things usually functioned, he low-key expected some kind of mind-fucking pocket dimension inside. But no, just regular organization, standard compartments, tough canvas dividers, slots stocked with vials of colored liquid, and other gear. That's it? Miles asked, looking up from his own bag. Ain't nothing else special to it? Indeed. There is, of course, some modest weatherproofing and a simple protective barrier rune. Hardly anything to set one's imagination alight. Were you expecting something a touch more spatially intriguing? Yeah, actually. Figured if you could negate weight, maybe you could bend space too. Ah, enchantments for such a thing do exist, as it happens. The royal family possesses a few bags capable of holding far more than their size would imply. Some of our veteran slayers carry similar equipment, as do a handful of the rather more enterprising merchants, those whose coffers rival even the crown's. Frightfully costly, of course, and devilishly troublesome to maintain. Artifacts, primarily. Fotham lowered his voice a bit. Relics from the demon-infested wastes. Ancient and, I dare say, utterly incomprehensible to the likes of us. The truly ambitious merchants, those whose coffers run deep enough, coordinate with OTAC to fund expeditions into Istrain in hopes of unearthing them. Most of those ventures end, predictably, empty-handed or entirely absent. He hesitated before continuing, though we did recover one rather remarkable piece. A satchel that simply Well, it rather makes a mockery of what we thought possible with spatial enchantments. But such treasures remain precisely that, treasures. These packs shall serve your immediate needs quite adequately. What's in them? Cole pulled out a blue vial of liquid from the pack. This one's for mana, I'm guessing? Fotham nodded. Red for healing, green for stamina. The packs also contain uniforms, field kits, writing implements, maintenance kits for your rifles, bedroll, basic medical supplies, should you lack a healer or potions, and items for daily necessities. Maps? Miles asked, grabbing his original pack. Indeed, though you'll require some instruction in our script first. As for your packs, they should afford sufficient space, should you wish to stow any of that peculiar equipment you've brought along. All our gear made it, except what we used last night, thank Christ. Phones, no-Ds, IFAKs, them solar chargers. Miles glanced at the broken AK sitting beside Cole's borrowed AKS. Well, most of our gear anyway. Losing the AK did hurt, but not a lot. Without access to 5.45 or the ability to make more, adopting Seldorn's weapons and possibly upgrading them seemed like a better play. Not that it'd be much useful outside of parts or reverse engineering. Ran dry. Cole picked up a small container from within the pack and opened it. Neat rows of mana crystals stored like batteries. Ah, Fotham said, leaning, you'll seldom find need to replace them, unless, of course, you've designs on hoisting mountains. Even then, the drain is gradual enough to afford you ample warning. What if it runs dry mid-fight? Switch to strengthening magic? Channel mana? It sounded a bit stupid, considering it'd be far more prudent to just swap out the crystals once they get low, but curiosity had gotten the better of Cole. Channel mana. Fotham's decisiveness was surprising. We've tested this, in fact. The mana expended in either case is near equal, though channeling proves far simpler than fortifying the body, unless, of course, the body is already fortified. Cole nodded. So when's our training start? Training begins on the morrow, Fotham replied, rubbing his eyes. I shall send Lady Verna from my office. She is most adept at teaching the fundamentals and has oft worked with Director Fernal's office. As for the present, he straightened slightly. Once you have eaten and rested, and after Sergeant Walker wakes, Prime Minister Alric wishes to discuss the particulars of your arrangement with the kingdom. Contracts, compensation, command structure, the necessary formalities. Elena returned, bringing with her a maid who pushed along a rolling cart. I shall leave you to your meal then, Fotham said, rising slowly. Take what rest you may. Someone will come to fetch you when the Prime Minister is prepared to receive you.